This is a meeting of the Greenfield, special meeting of the Greenfield Zoning Board of Appeals. We're at City Hall in the second floor meeting room at 14 Court Square in Greenfield, Massachusetts. It is Thursday, April 17th, 2025. It is now 6:30 p.m. Chair statement. This meeting is being recorded by the Zoning Board of Appeals. If any other persons present are doing the same, you must notify the chairperson at this time. According to Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 20, small section V, no person shall address a meeting of a public body without permission of the chair, and all persons shall, at the request of the chair, be silent. No person shall disrupt the proceedings of a meeting of a public body. If, after clear warning from the chair, a person continues to disrupt the proceedings, the chair may order the person to withdraw from the meeting. And if the person still does not withdraw, the chair may authorize a constable or other officer to remove the person from the meeting. Okay. All uphill from here. All right, so let's do a roll call of members. Members present, state your name.
Mark Maloney.
Jim Nguyen.
Debbie Jones.
Eric Green.
Charles Roberts.
And David Singer. And sitting on the panel today, listening to these matters will be
Peter Wozniak. Mark Maloney.
Jim Nguyen.
Debbie Jones.
David Singer. Thank you. Mr. Clerk, would you please read the, we're going to, do we need to vote to come out of, we continued it. We don't need to vote.
Don't need to vote.
All right. Would you please read the applications for both the variance and the special permit?
Continued from April 9th, 2025. Application of Veridity Wireless LLC for property located at 0 Fairview Street West. Assessor's tax map R24 lot 7A, which is located in the general commercial DC zoning district for the variance pursuant to sections 200-8.7 the zoning ordinance in order to allow the construction of a new wireless communication structure comprised of ground-based equipment cabinets and antennas to be on top of a monopole measured 170 feet high with insufficient volume. Yeah, continuation from April 9th, 2025. Application of Veridity Wireless LLC for property located at 0 Fairview Street West. Assessors map R24 lot 7A, which is located in the general commercial GC zoning district for a special permit pursuant to sections 200-4.9 C3, 200-7.14, 200-8.3, and 200-8.4 of the zoning ordinance in order to allow the construction of a new communication structure comprised of ground-based equipment cabinets and antennas mounted on top of a pole measuring 170 feet in height at this location.
Thank you. All right, so tonight we're going to hear from the concerned citizens. This night is open for you all to speak and your representatives to speak. Is there somebody that's leading the concerned citizens tonight in terms of how this is organized? I know that you have an attorney waiting. Do you think maybe the attorney should speak first? Sir, Attorney Campanelli, hi.
Good evening. Hi, thank you.
Hi, would you like to wait or would you like to go first?
I think I think one of my clients had an expert to go before me, but I'll do as the board wants, but.
Oh, I see, Dr. Chamberlain. I'm sorry. Thank you. Yes, I'm going to press pause on you.
Thank you.
And Dr. Chamberlain.
Hello.
Hi, how are you? I
Doing
guess,
pretty
would
well.
everybody be okay if Dr. Chamberlain spoke first? Okay, would you state your name and I guess where you live for the record and why you're here? Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, my name's Kent Chamberlain, and I'm from Durham, New Hampshire, professor emeritus. And the reason I'm here is that I've been asked to weigh in on the tower. And in addition to that, I served on a state commission in New Hampshire where we explored wireless radiation in depth. And I've been working in that area ever since. So I'm an expert in radio frequency engineering, and I'll be going over my credentials as I give my presentation or before I give my presentation. So you'll get a sense of what my background is and how it might be applied to the question you're considering today.
Got a question? Oh,
And can I break in here? Unfortunately, Alana is held up. Her babysitter is not there. So is there someone, Eric, I think Alana sent you Dr. Chamberlain's introduction. Would you like me to read it, or would somebody on the ZBA or public like to read it to introduce Dr. Chamberlain so you know his background?
I didn't receive that, so up to the board chair's purview.
Okay,
Anybody have an objection with Safe Tech Forward?
my name is
Moving
Pam. I'm sorry. Again, your settings don't allow me to change my name, and I'm a colleague of Dr. Chamberlain's.
Okay, please do.
Give me just a second here. Thank you. Okay, so Dr. Chamberlain is the past chair and professor emeritus in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering at the University of New Hampshire. In more than 40 years of his work in academia, he's performed research for over 25 sponsors, including the National Science Foundation. He's received 2 Fulbright Awards, including the prestigious Fulbright Distinguished Chair. He's also served as an associate editor for the Institute for Electrical and Electronic Engineers, the IEEE, and he regularly performs reviews for them and other technical and scientific publications. Dr. Chamberlain also served on the New Hampshire State Commission that was convened through legislation to explore the impacts of wireless radiation. Since serving on the commission, he's been active in carrying out the recommendations of the commission by working with legislators and community groups around the world. Dr. Chamberlain is a founding member of the International Commission on the Biological Effects of Electromagnetic Fields, which is an international group of renowned scientists with expertise in radiation and the biological effects. He's the president of the Environmental Health Trust, and last summer, he engaged in a speaking tour in Europe where he presented the findings of the New Hampshire Commission to a group that included the Royal Society of Medicine in London. So, Dr. Chamberlain, we're ready for your presentation.
Thank you very much for
Thank
reading
you.
that. I know it's a mouthful, but I do want to give you all a sense that I'm coming at this not as a Luddite, somebody who hates technology, far from it. I do have some things that, I will be talking about that reflect on the bad sides, the potential harms of technology. But at the same time, being a radio frequency engineer, I know of solutions, and I'll be talking about some of those as well. But I think maybe the best way to move forward is to start showing my slides, which I'm assuming you can see now.
Yes, thank you.
Fantastic. So I also need to have this conflict of interest declaration. So many people that you're going to be hearing from regarding this issue have very much vested interests. I don't. I'm not being compensated to do what I'm doing, and I don't have any tie or any tie to the outcome. If you choose one way or the other, doesn't affect me. So I'm really speaking to you today as citizen to citizen. And I should let you know also, in addition to what Pam read, I serve on a school board. I'm chairing a school board, and I've been on boards not dissimilar from the one I'm looking at right now for most of my career. I've kept a hand in as a good citizen, or trying to be a good citizen. So that's where I'm coming from. And the next thing you'll want to know is, okay, is this guy qualified to give us comments? And I'm not going to go through this in great detail. I know it's a busy slide, but you do need to know where I'm coming from, what my credentials are that allow me to say the things I'm going to say or to have you believe the things I'm going to say. And seeing how you're looking at the screen, you may not be able to see everything, but I'll go through some of the highlights. I started my professional career as a co-op student working in electronic countermeasures for the Air Force. So I got an understanding of what jamming is and what the basic parameters are. And then I went to Ohio University and I did work on, avionics. And so I did computer modeling and made measurements on navigation communication systems, including the instrument landing system, microwave landing system, the VHF Omni Range, which is what VOR stands for, air-to-ground and ground-to-air, ground-to-ground communication system. So in that position, I went out or I would create a model, first of all, or use somebody else's model, and then validate the model was giving accurate results. And that very much applies to what you're considering because you're looking at coverage maps. And that's what I've done through a lot of my career is taking models and making sure they give the results you want them to give. I better rephrase that they give accurate results. So I did develop my own models, and I've published on about those models, and I've worked for I think almost every government agency in helping them in predict, where a signal will and will not be. I then moved to from Ohio University and became a faculty member at the University of New Hampshire here, and continued some of the same thing. I did modeling and measurements of meteor burst communication for the Air Force, modeled air-ground data link for the Federal Aviation Administration. I developed adjacent channel and co-channel models for the Federal Aviation Administration. I did perform measured and modeled low altitude propagation effects for the U.S. Navy, and then using measurements and modeling tools to evaluate alternative cell phone communications for the Department of Justice. And that's going to be particularly relevant to your issue when you're looking at alternative ways to provide coverage. So I've developed and taught courses in computational electronics, electromagnetics, my whole career, and that includes having students create their own propagation models. So in terms of having the knowledge to be able to answer questions that I suspect that you would have, I hope that I will have satisfied them, or I can go into greater detail about each of those bullet points. So let me move forward and just what's my motivation for being here, for presenting to you? And that is, after serving on this state commission, and it's a formal state commission that was about 5 years ago, I saw that there was a lot of misinformation going around about wireless communication. And some of that misinformation led to people being harmed. And I can go into greater detail about what that harm constituted. And so kind of took it upon myself, feel duty bound to spread the word. I found out something that does impact people's health and well-being, and then other things beyond that. And I'm not going to, that's what I'm going to be able to provide to you, I hope, this evening. So I can see that there's a fair number of people in the room there, and there may be a fair number of questions. So I'd like to have this conversation be pretty much guided by you. I can go on for the next hour easily with no interruptions. But I want this to when we're all said and done, that you walk out of there going, yeah, I have a pretty good idea of what's going on. I have a much better feel for the issue. So I don't want to just simply get up here and yak as I can do. I'd like to have this be interactive. So and the reason I'm saying that is if you have questions, if I say something that really you don't quite get, or maybe I wasn't sufficiently clear on, feel free to stop me. So I also want to note that I'm not going to be providing you a detailed engineering analysis. I'm going to give you an overview and let you know what questions need to be asked. And so I hope that the answers that I give will help you make the right decision regarding the variance that's being sought. So having said that, I'll take a breath and a sip. So what's going on now is that cell towers are being put up near residential areas. And we saw that when I was serving on the commission. The commission ended in 2020. And even during that time, we saw this huge rollout of towers in and near residential areas. And we wanted to know why. So there were big changes then and now in where and how cell towers are sited, and things are changing and escalating. And we're seeing a significant escalation in telecom companies siting towers or attempting to site them outside their normal zoning areas, because they are zoned for industrial, as you know. And so they're being put, and variances being sought so that they can be put in people's neighborhoods, near their schools, or even on their schools. So that was one thing that we saw on the commission, and it really raised some questions. What's going on here? We are seeing people trying to put in cell towers in areas where there is already clear coverage, clear cell phone coverage. Why are they doing that? Well, the answer is it's part of a business model. So let me run through this, and it's something that you're probably already familiar with, maybe not by looking at this, but from the ads you've been hearing for wireless home internet. Because what you're looking at now on the left is what is wired. And that's what most of us have today. That's what I'm talking to you over is wired internet. And so it goes into everybody's home. It doesn't matter if you have a cell tower nearby, you still have lightning fast connectivity to the internet. So I don't know if you can see this very clearly from your vantage point, but you do have a cable going into each home, and you can hook it up to your own wireless router if you want, or you can just wire it to your computer. In fact, after serving on the commission, I have it wired to my computer now. So that is what exists right now, and I have to pay a wireless provider, I'm sorry, a wired provider every month. Now, what telecom seems to be shooting for, this seems to be their business model, and it's been confirmed by a number of people, and that is instead of having the wire, having the internet go into everybody's home, they've pulled it out of the homes and hooked it up to antennas near the home. And so what the idea is with wireless home internet, and some of you probably are very familiar with this, you go to your local Verizon office or AT&T office and buy one of these little boxes. It's a wireless home internet, and it's got one plug on it. And you plug it in, and voila, you have Wi-Fi in your home. You don't have to deal with that cable guy anymore. And so it does offer a convenience. And that is the idea, and that's why you need to have nearby strong signals in order to make this idea work, the wireless home internet. But it does have drawbacks, so it's definitely going to be more convenient. And in the beginning, it's going to look a lot cheaper. You're not going to have to be dealing with that cable guy. So it's taking one bill that you don't have to pay. But it does introduce some major problems, and one is that it's a far greater exposure to wireless radiation. Now, I'm not sure what your feelings are about exposure to wireless radiation, but on the commission, we felt that people should have the opportunity to opt out. In other words, if they didn't want to be exposed, they should be able to turn off their own devices and have very low exposure to electromagnetic fields. But if you have wireless home internet, it's likely that you'll have a tower close enough to your home where you have no choice. You're going to be exposed. And I've done work with the Department of Justice, and it shows that wireless communication can be unreliable. And I don't think that'll surprise anybody, but they may not be available in an emergency. And that was one of the things the Department of Justice asked me to look at as a researcher. You know, what happens if cell towers become saturated in an emergency situation when everybody grabs their cell phones? And what about their hackability? The fact that you have a signal being radiated out where anybody with an antenna can receive that signal means that you're going to be far more easily hacked than a wired solution, such as the cable guy, paying the cable guy. And here's a surprise for a lot of people. Wireless devices can be jammed very easily. And you know, for example, just do a quick Google on cell phone jammers, and you'll come up with a lot of options for reasonable prices. And why that matters, by the way, using them is illegal, so you don't want to do that. Yeah, if you want to buy one, be really careful. That could get you in trouble. But what you can do if you have one of these and you are an unscrupulous type, and you want to rob somebody, and you know that they have wireless home security devices, like the sensors, wireless motion detectors, wireless window opening detectors, you simply go up to their home, turn on the cell phone jammer, and everything shuts down, including their connection to the internet if they have wireless home internet. So they go in, they burgle you, they turn their jammer off, walk away, and you never knew that what hit you. So there are issues like that, cybersecurity issues that you should be aware of as a zoning board. And there's another thing, and I don't know if this is something that a ZBA will consider, but if people do go with a large percentage of people go with the wireless home internet, a lot of these cable companies are going to dry up, making the only way to communicate available to the internet is going to be through the wireless approach. So just saying that there are a lot of problems associated with this, with the wireless home internet. And I don't know how what you need to assume or what you need to know about that. And I can maybe give a pause here and see if you have comments to say, Kent, you're going in the wrong direction, or Kent, yeah, can you tell us more about something? Because I can tell you a lot more about this.
Well, and Kent, can I pop in? What I'd like to mention
please.
too is that some of you in the ZBA have probably heard about a month ago or two, there was a lot of reporting on the transnational gangs that were going around the country that were robbing people's homes. Oftentimes there were athletes that were targeted, and they were using the jamming that Dr. Chamberlain's talking about. A lot of more affluent areas have been targeted this way. And unfortunately, with some of our convenience, we're seeing some vulnerabilities that have some pretty significant consequences that we need to be aware of when we decide about how we're going to site the infrastructure in our communities.
Right. And so what the companies, the telecom has to do sometimes is they have to seek these variances that Pam just mentioned. And
Doctor,
yes.
Doctor, sorry to interrupt
Please
you.
call
It
me
may be hard
Kent.
for you to see. I have a woman in the audience who wants to ask you a question. Can
It's
you,
a quick question.
can you just identify yourself, please?
Julie Page, owner 9 Minor Street.
Thank you.
My quick question is this: we can't get landlines anymore because of what's happened with the cable company. You know, no matter what it is you're trying to put in, you can't get a standard landline. I'm an EMT and firefighter for the fun of it. I do disaster response for fun. I became a ham radio person because when the systems go out, that's all you've got left to communicate between ambulance and hospital. If we're stuck with only wireless, from what you've seen in your studies, any chance landlines, traditional landlines might come back?
Well, that would be great if they did come back. And I would say keep your wired connection if you can, because even if our phone goes down, of course, our phone is tied in with BreezeLine. So yeah, you can have robust phone communication with wired connections that you won't be able to enjoy with wireless.
Thank you.
And thank you for your service, by the way. So let's say that you're a telecom company and you're trying to justify putting in enough infrastructure to make this wireless home internet work. Well, what do? You have to demonstrate a gap in coverage in many cases. And that's what's going on in your case, as I understand it. And so the ways to show that, one would be a dropped call log, and that is the gold standard. And so if you have a company that's claiming there are gaps, but they don't provide the gold standard for you, I would look at that very much askance. I'm not in your position right now. I'm not serving on your board, but that's something that I would really demand, knowing what I know now. And that's why I think you're listening to me right now, is to find out what somebody who's been in this field a while knows. So no dropped call log. There's probably not dropped calls, and I'll back that up in just a moment. Measurements, and probably the best way is just if there's a claim about gaps, a gap in coverage,
Good question.
go and just,
Certainly. Doctor, I'm sorry, Dr. Chamberlain.
yeah.
You said it was okay to interrupt you. if
But yes,
there was a question,
absolutely, absolutely.
And I'm the designated interrupter, so.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
My name's Terry and.
Can you see Terry or hear Terry?
I can hear
Hello.
Terry.
Terry,
No,
can you?
it's kind of a question
Well,
for
I'm sorry, Terry.
everyone,
You want
really.
full name and where you're.
Terry Kashner, Bowman Street.
In Greenfield.
Yes.
Thank you.
Is this really about what he said, or is it about a variance? Is it really about coverage? Or is it about whether you're gonna grant a variance? I mean,
All right, can we put
Yeah.
that question aside for now?
okay.
Good question. Let him continue and people can ask him about his presentation, and there will be a point in time when you can come back to me if I forget, but I will answer your question.
Okay.
Oh, thank you, because it will take more than a minute.
Could I ask?
Okay.
Wait, is your question relative to Dr. Chamberlain?
Yes.
Please, and name,
Call me Kent, please.
okay, Ken,
Milan Dragisevich on High Street in Greenfield.
thank you.
Thank you for this presentation, Kent. You mentioned that it's increased wireless radiation. Maybe you're going to get into this a little bit later in your talk, what is the nature of that wireless radiation? What in fact does it do to the environment or the body? I've heard various things over the years, cell phone company, we all have these smartphones in our pocket. The smartphone companies deny that there's any causal effects. It doesn't seem to interest the media much, from what I've gathered in mainstream media. So what is the latest, I guess, on this wireless radiation? And you're saying it's much higher with these towers. What does that mean in terms of real?
Oh my gosh, you have asked the question that perhaps I should hold back on. When I agreed to do this, it was suggested that I really focus on the engineering to begin with. I have a full presentation that I can give to tell you what an independent commission of experts found that answers your question directly. And I hope that we can get to that, and I hope I'm allowed to present that information because that's really key. Even though you can't use the health or in the environment to turn down a permit, you should know it as being board members. You should know what the harm is caused by exposure to radiation. And I definitely can answer that question in excruciating detail if you'd like. But perhaps the best thing for me to do now is just get through some of the engineering questions, and then I can go right, and I'd like to go into what we found on the New Hampshire Commission. Does that sound like a reasonable deal?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, sure. Please, the name, wait,
I know,
name,
my name is Shannon Tate, Giordano.
so the way, so, yes. Can you stand up so we can?
Mr. Chairman, just a procedural thing. For the minutes, it'd be good if they could give their numbered address for the meeting, right, so I can do the meeting minutes. Sometimes I can't catch the name, but if I know the address, I can look it up.
Did you not get the address?
No, they all just said the street name. Nobody gave us a number.
Mine is 210 High Street.
Thank you, sir.
Go ahead, can you give it again? Can you please stand up? Yes, it'll be helpful, thanks. And your name and address again.
My name is Shannon Tate Giordano and I live on 49 Silver Way.
Thank you.
And all I'm asking is I know that, and I've said he hopes that he can get to the health stuff. And I know that for myself, like my family's here, I know some, like 3 other neighbors of mine are here and even some other people that I know, that we're all here for that information. So if we could definitely cover that, that feels like the reason why we're here tonight. So I just hope that we can get to that part because I feel like probably it's important.
Okay, by a show of hands, is this why most people are here? Yes, show of hands.
Well, I'm glad to have that information.
Okay, that's fair.
And that said, Kent, and just for the audience to know, Dr. Chamberlain does cover this. You know, he wanted to meet the asks of the ZBA that he use his engineering analysis to be able to discuss the variance. So there's a short presentation on that as well. And then if you want him to expand on the public health piece, he's capable of doing that. That's up to you guys. You guys do.
Yeah, no,
it, but it's going to be important that he gets the variance.
It's up to me. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so I need a minute to think about this. I do want all of you to get the information from Dr. Chamberlain, so I'm going to allow him to give that information to you. You all have to understand, if you're also here to oppose the tower, and you think this is the reason that the tower can be opposed, that is not true. That our board does not have the power to get involved in that aspect of this permit. And don't misunderstand me. I may feel after listening that I don't like anything he's saying and that I want to react to what he's saying in some way, but that is not what I can do on this board. So I'm happy to do this because we're all citizens together and let this happen. But I want you to understand. So if you have things, if I will let Dr. Chamberlain speak on other matters, but it's the other matters that matter to the variance and the special permit, not this. It is something that I need, I mean, can I be any clearer than that? I'm going to let him speak. What?
I just have a clarifying.
Yes.
So you're saying that even if he was to say the worst thing, that it is absolutely terrible for people's health and it should not go into a residential neighborhood, that will not play any part in your decision-making process and you'll just ignore it regardless of what he's saying?
No, I didn't say that at all.
So, but you're saying it's not coming into the equation on how you can, get these people knocking? Is that?
There's an equation in which we get from point A to making a decision. There's an equation. Call it an equation, if math is the thing. This is not part of our equation. Now, we can condition the tower to follow FCC guidelines so that you know that whatever the US government says is safe is going to be followed with it. But we cannot incorporate this information into our decision, number one. And number two, that would mean that the applicant would also get a chance to bring their expert to tell us maybe that this isn't really what's going on at all. So this is not our jurisdiction. But I'm happy for you all to hear this. If you think it's a good tutorial, and if it's good for our city councilors, and it's good for other people that are legislators, and you think you want to talk to them about this, that's fine. We're judges, we're not legislators. So we judge based on what is in our jurisdiction to judge. And I'm just telling you that if we were to incorporate this into our decision, it would be appealed and overturned, and the tower would be allowed. So you do not want us to make this the reason if we decide not to have to grant the variance. So you just have to understand that. I'm saying that from my heart. So you have to understand that's the way it works. I'm happy to have him speak. I'm happy to listen. Maybe some cells in my body will be affected by what I hear, but I am not going to put that into any of the decisions. I'm not going to allow this to be a part of how we decide the case. Yes.
Just to be sure that everybody fully understands, does it make sense to just provide the context around some of the federal laws that say that this isn't our choice as a ZBA to
Sure.
not consider?
Would it be helpful if I gave a
Federal
little
law.
legal tutorial about?
I think you need to provide that context for folks.
Okay.
I think you should.
Okay. So ordinarily, people come before us and we have jurisdiction over the case based on state law and local law, our ordinances. And our ordinances have a lot of power, and the courts especially have said that localities have a right to control their existence through zoning to some degree, especially health and safety. Okay, so that's the norm. What we've all had to learn is that this time there's a federal law that specifically says in it, we know that these local communities are not going to be happy with us putting these cell towers in. So we're going to write language that the Constitution allows us to write, which is that because this is interstate commerce, we get to supersede the local laws on some levels. It does pay lip service to local control. But as you read the cases, you understand that local control has to come from a place that has nothing to do with the radiation. I'll start with that. But it comes from a place of, is this tower safe if it falls? We have 170 feet safe zone. Is it safe if it falls? Do they have a hardship on the parcel? Is this parcel shaped in a way that it's impossible for them to achieve the 170-foot fall, which is a fact. They can't. They were pushed over because of the wetlands, and now the lot has different attributes. And they're asking us to say, oh, that's tough luck. We'll grant you a variance. So that's what they're asking us to do under state law. The special permit, I think, is more straightforward, is that in our zoning laws, if we don't want something to happen for free, like you can just walk in and get it done and your neighbors don't know anything about it, nobody can comment on it, and it just happens. Those are called things that are allowed by right. Then you have things that are allowed by special permit, and those are things that we would like to see happen, but we want to give you all an opportunity to come in and tell us what you think about how they're approaching this particular use or structure, and either tell us that it's totally out of line, which is probably a hard standard to achieve, or we want conditions on it. And so your input and the applicant's input all come together and we give a special permit. It also has to be compatible with the neighborhood and all those kinds of things, but a special permit kind of means that we're looking for people to make that application. A variance is make an exception to the general rule. And the law in Massachusetts provides certain factors that we have to look at, and they're summary, they're not or. 1 plus this plus this. They all have to, they have to meet all the criteria. And it's difficult to get a variance in Massachusetts. Okay, the circumstances really have to be, I'll call for lack of a better word, unique. So I know I know your brains are all moving around, but just let me continue. So now we're circling back to the federal statute. So this federal statute says, oh, by the way, if the carrier comes and proves that they both have a significant gap in coverage that needs to be filled, because we, the federal government, we've created this statute because we want these gaps to be filled. That's our primary purpose. This law's primary purpose is to fill gaps in wireless cell service. So they have to prove that this is the only place they could do it. And if we say no, that there will be a tremendous gap in service area-wide, causing distress in the system that they're legislated to protect. So if that were the case, then those factors are defined as hardship, like in Massachusetts variance law. So now you have a federal statute defining hardship as not the shape of the lot or any of the unique factors or anything else, but if they can't get cell service, guess what? That is a hardship. And you have to consider that a hardship, and you have to consider the degree of that hardship when you're making a decision. So those are the things that interest us. Have they proved this a significant gap? Is this the only place they can put this? Is the 170 down there? There's a remedy that they're proposing, the applicant's proposing, which is that there'll be a part of the tower that will be softer than the rest of the tower. So if there's a monumental event, the tower will break and fall in the middle. So it will land within technically the zone that we've created, the 170 feet or whatever the distance is. So in line with the federal statute, they're also pushing us by saying, well, you've enacted this ordinance because of safety, but we can overcome the safety concern. And now you have to look at it like the regular factors in zoning. And, and we have a hardship here and you have to let us have our tower. So those are the things, Doctor, and I know Attorney Campanelli will speak to all those things because those are the things that we can really focus on. But because you're all here to listen to this, and thank you for listening to me, I will go forward. But I'd like it to be maybe 15 minutes because I know you could probably give us all the without going into too much more detail. So I'm going to let you proceed for 15 minutes on the effects of radiation.
Well, this is not the effects of radiation. This is what you need to know and what you need to do to justify and show that you have a gap. And if you don't have
Okay,
a drop
you could talk about that if you want. I think people here want to hear the health effects of the radiation.
I could do
That's
that.
good.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I can jump
too
right
soon.
to that.
Okay, go whatever they want. It's your.
Okay, I don't think
you.
there's first of all, I would like to make the statement on the record that I don't think there's a gap. Look at what it takes to get a good phone call. And I know this is a busy slide. To have a great signal, it's minus 50 to minus 79 dBm. That's just a rating of power. Good signal is minus 85 to minus 89. And then when you look at their map, they're showing as good as everything that's greater than minus 85. So in other words, I'm pretty confident you could go into this area right here and you'd be able to make a phone call just fine. So I don't think there's a gap, and I can throw the question out to everybody there, is there a demonstrated gap outside? Can people go out and make a phone call?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, all right. So this has I don't think this has anything to do really with complying with, or filling a gap. This has to do with putting up the infrastructure that will allow industry to put in wireless home internet. So enough said, and because people want to hear the health and environmental impacts, I'm simply going to go forward. The commission I served on was formed by legislators. The legislators were being told by their constituents that they were being harmed by wireless radiation, and yet these same legislators were being told by industry that no, it's totally harmless and you need to put in more infrastructure. So what do? The legislators formed this bipartisan commission, or this, and they had through bipartisan legislation that was to convene the right number of people to ask the right number of questions to answer once and for all, we had hoped, whether or not wireless radiation is harmful. And so in the end, we ended up with 13 commission members. This happens when I try to go quickly, and I do want to get quickly because there's some things that I think you need to hear. So in the final analysis, we had people with backgrounds in medicine. We had 2 medical doctors, physics, toxicology, electromagnetics, that was me, epidemiology, biostatistics, occupational health, etc. So we had the expertise of non-biased experts, of unbiased experts, to answer the questions that were being asked of us. And I'll just give you the first question right here, and that is, why does the insurance company, and why, including Lloyd's of London, they recognize wireless radiation as a risk, but there's not an insurance company there around that will insure against it. And there were a number of other questions that were pretty obvious. You know, there clearly is a problem that is not being recognized with the limits that are set right now. So what did we do in our over a year of the commission meeting? We looked at peer-reviewed publications. We invited the regulatory agencies, but none of them would come talk with us and provide us with the information about the harms of wireless radiation, or whether or not, or even if there were harms. And we brought in outside experts, people recognized nationally and internationally with expertise in the relationship between wireless radiation and health. And all of them but one said, yeah, there's a problem, and they demonstrated why they thought it was. They showed us the information they had that demonstrated that there were problems. And that's except for the one presenter who was brought in by the telecom industry. And that was the only presenter that was paid to be there. And that's why in the beginning I made it really clear that I wasn't getting paid to do this, because the only people that I've ever heard claim that there are no harms associated with wireless radiation are those with some affiliation with the telecom. So what we found in our study is that the only problems, or not the only, maybe to jump here. The mechanism is well known, but the way that the long-term exposure to cellular, cell phone, and wireless radiation, it works on creating oxidative stress within the body. And I think most people are familiar with free radicals and the fact that they're something you don't want to have, because free radicals, oxidative stress, lead to chronic inflammation that lead to a host of diseases, including the ones shown right here. And I don't have time with the 15 minutes to go over this in detail, but if you look at what's been going on in this country in the past, 25 years or more, you've seen this very significant increase. Alzheimer's, for example, has more than doubled since the year 2000. You look at what's going on in diabetes. You know, it starts out relatively low in 2004, but then as the years increase, the incidence of age-adjusted diabetes, type 2 diabetes, has been increasing. So what happened between 2004 and 2012? Well, that's when the iPhone came out, 2007. So we're seeing these marked increases in these diseases that have been shown to be associated with radiation exposure. And then you can see the same thing for tumors, an increase in tumors, in brain tumors, not necessarily malignant tumors, but tumors. By the way, a tumor doesn't have to be malignant to kill you, a brain tumor in particular. So we're also seeing this increase in Parkinson's disease. And notice the breakpoints on this curve. Wow. I mean, that's really significant. I know people that have Parkinson's, and I never before knew that, people that had Parkinson's. So I'm going kind of quickly, so but feel free to interrupt me. So what has changed in the period of time roughly between, the 1990s and present day is our exposure to electromagnetic fields. And we can judge that by the wireless network density in the US. Start off 2004, and you can see that as we step forward in years to 2008, to 2012, to 2019, my gosh, at 2019, which 6 years ago, it's hard to find a place where you don't have exposure to electromagnetic fields. So another one that can very much convince the commission that there was something going on. You know, it wasn't what industry was telling us. Industry was saying, which some of you, I think somebody just said there, that it's harmless. Well, this is something that's been known for quite a while. This is a 2004 report. And that is if you do a COMET assay on a DNA, here's a single cell of DNA, a control, you pluck it out and you do the assay on it, it's nice and symmetric. You expose it to equivalent of, in this case, 1,600 chest x-rays, you would expect to see a problem. As we know that x-rays are ionizing radiation, and so you'd expect to see this type of effect. But you see the same type of effect when you expose a cell, a DNA cell, to wireless radiation, like a mobile phone, as is shown right here. So clearly, something is going on. Something else, and I'll try to go through this quickly because this answers some questions very directly. And that is death rates from cancer versus distance people live from a cell tower. And this is very much applicable to the question you're addressing. And this is a peer-reviewed article, and it explored the relationship between cancer deaths, or the death rate, and the distance people lived from a cell tower. They collected the data. The researchers used a government database to find out, when people died of cancer, where they lived with respect to a cell tower. And so they were able to come up with the death rate versus distance people lived from a cell tower. And so they looked at a large number of cases, over 7,000 cancer deaths for over 800 towers. And if you understand statistics, you realize that having these large numbers gives you a high degree of confidence in the results obtained. Now, what's important here is this study was done between 1996 and 2006. And the reason I say that's important is that during that time frame, not many people in that area, in the area where this test was done, the study was done, had their own electronic devices, had their own cell phones. And so what we're looking at is simply the effect of living near a tower and not the effect of their own electronics. So the results of the study can be shown in a single slide, which is this one right here. And what you're looking at with the blue line is the death rate by cancer for the population in general. What you're seeing in the red trace is for people in the study who lived within a kilometer of a cell tower, what their death rate was. And it's monotonic, as you can see. So the farther you get away from the cell tower, the closer you get to the death rate by cancer for the population in general. It's pretty clear and pretty convincing. The New Hampshire Commission chose 500 meters as a reasonable place to be, reasonable. Frankly, I'd like to be farther than that, but we realized that by our recommending a setback distance farther than that, that wouldn't be acceptable to industry. So we just said 500 meters, that seems to be reasonable. Now, this is not just a one-off study. There have been other studies, and in fact, since then, I need to update this slide. There have been a lot more than 38 studies, as you're seeing right here. A meta-study is where you take the results of previous studies and you combine them all together to come up with even more unbelievably statistically significant results. And most of them showed that, yeah, there are effects, there are negative effects, and something that kept appearing is that a distance of 500 meters from a cell tower appears to be a reasonable. I'm not saying safe. Some people will tell you there are no safe distances for radiation of this type. So at this point, you might be wondering, well, what are the standards? How were they set? And this is turns out that they were actually set in the 1980s. So the standards that are set for what we are exposed to today, the standards were set in the 1980s, and they're based on behavioral studies of monkeys, short-term behavioral studies lasting an hour or less. And this is for our 24/7 exposure. And the way they did it, is they said, well, the only thing that's going to hurt you from a cell phone or cell tower or wireless radiation is the heating effect. And so if it doesn't heat you up like a microwave would heat you up, then it's not going to harm you. So that was their assumption. And what they did is they took these animals. These animals were food deprived and they had been trained to push a lever to get food. So they were food deprived at the beginning of the study. They were put into a cage. And then they started ramping up the exposure, the radiation they were exposed to, until the animals could no longer push the lever and get food. That's why it's called a behavioral study. And that upper limit at which they could no longer press the lever for food was designated as the threshold dose. Now, some of the monkeys had burns on their faces at that point, but they said that's the threshold dose. And then they took that value, that number, divided it by 50, the number of that represented the exposure, divided it by 50 and said, well, that's the exposure that should be safe for the population in general. By the way, if you're dealing with chemicals and looking at chemical exposure, you would take a safety factor of in the thousands. But in this case, it's, well, 50 should be fine. It's totally arbitrary. It's not based on any relative risk that they were trying to achieve because they don't know the relative risk. And again, emphasizing that this study was done in an hour or less. And the reason that is just not a good way to do it is let's look at long-term exposure because that's we know to be to be the problem. If you look at only the short-term effect of smoking, for example, we could do a study where we would have people smoke a pack of cigarettes each within an hour. And if they all lived, we'd say, hey, smoking must be safe. Well, we know that's not the case. So let's look at this with the slide that's in front of you right now. Here you have a mast on the left, and then 465 feet away from it, you have a tree. And back in 2008, looking pretty good. But you go 7 years after that, and my gosh, what's happening to the left side of that tree? And if you go another 4 years, they had to finally cut the tree down. And what's important here is if you look at what's in the red circle right here, is that the exposure on the left side of the tree was only 0.03% of the FCC limit. I mean, it's the long-term exposure that we're concerned about, and that's why we're so concerned about kids in school being exposed. It's why we're so concerned about people being exposed by cell towers in their sleep. And the values they might see in their home from having a nearby cell tower could very likely be greater than the values that I'm showing you right here. So why is this happening? And I think this is something else you need to know, and it certainly had an impact on us in the commission. And that is captured agency, how the Federal Communications Commission is dominated by the industries it presumably regulates. This is not from some extremist website. This is from the Harvard University Center for Ethics. And what it shows here is that industry controls the FCC. And they have this revolving door here where people who run the FCC, well, then 1 year they're going to be running industry or have a high position in industry the next year, and they'll keep going back and forth. And there are plenty of examples of that are documented in this report. So you might want to Google simply Harvard FCC captured, and you'll come up with this report. It's good reading. And what that report shows is how the industry is keeping us in the dark. And that's why I feel compelled to be out here talking to you tonight, because you're not going to be hearing this information from many other sources. Because who has a huge influence on the media, but one of media's major advertisers, that is telecom. And also, who owns a lot of telecom? Telecom is owned, the people who own telecom also own a lot of media outlets. So they use a lot of money and they know how to use it. Yeah.
Kent, I'm gonna interrupt you for a second.
Yeah.
I appreciate all that it feels like you're off the health issues and you're more into telling us a little more information that I appreciate, but we're running, time is
Yeah, understood.
is important. So are you done with the health presentation?
Let me make sure. Yeah, I really am. But just remember what you guys, I can't see you guys well enough to know if you're old enough to remember commercials like these. But Cigarettes do not cause cancers. Be careful when you have people from industry funding things like this that tell you it's okay. It's not, but you can see that it's something that radiation, low-level wireless radiation is something that happens over time.
All
And
right.
you don't want to have it near your home.
Thank you. Are there more things relevant to the factors that I expressed regarding the variance, for example? You said you were going to talk about some safety issues?
Well, the safety
It's in the
issue,
middle of talking about dropped calls, and I'd like to hear that information.
Okay, I'll go back to that. Sure.
okay, so yeah, you need to prove it. If you're claiming that there are dropped calls, how do you prove it? And I did want to say things about mapping because I'm going to go back to the map and show it off. And I certainly understand the time crunch. So if you look at the maps that are provided, and I did, right? So once you got me started, I jumped away from this, and right here you should see it. They show this gap in coverage. Well, that's they're only showing in green things that are a very good and strong signal. But what it's pretty clear to me is that you have plenty of signal in this area right here. You don't have an issue. You don't need another tower unless you want to put in the 5G home internet. Now, I'm not a believer. I'm a very much a believer in modeling, but what I am not a believer in is looking at just modeled results that are just tossed at you. I've seen too many times where there's an effect called GJO, garbage in, garbage out, and so they're just presenting a map. How do you know it's right? And so the thing that is oftentimes required when you're providing model data is you have to at least have some calibration point and some validation information.
Ken,
Yeah. Oh,
what if they gave us the dropped call data? How would we know how would we know it was honest either? I mean, the only way we could know this is accurate is one, to bring our common sense to it.
Yeah.
And the other, based on what you just said, is, what is it that we want as a community? And, if the community wants 5G internet, then maybe that tower is a good idea. So,
yeah, I've heard that
it's all, thank you very much. Are there other things that are different from was he helpful?
That's fine.
No, please. Is there anything else the other areas that you want to talk about? Then if there are people here that want to ask you questions, that's fine. But I just want to get an idea of what's left for your presentation.
Well, I mean, I whipped through some things and I could have spent more time in explaining more deeply. But the bottom line is that you take a commission of experts who have expertise to answer the question about the effects on health and the environment of something like wireless radiation. And we came to the conclusion that, yeah, it's harmful and you should do things to protect people against it. And towers should be located no closer than 500 meters, which is 1,640 feet, from where people live, work, or recreate.
Okay, well, that's a good point, and thank you. We did get that. Go ahead.
Small quick question about
Name again, just for the record, just so we can hear it.
Julie Page 9 Minor Street. 5G, 4G, 3G, whatever. Antique buildings, my 4G and my 3G work better than 5G, especially when I'm in an antique building, which we have a lot of around here. And so if they're trying to get coverage, I work in a spot on Main Street. And if my cell phone goes off, I gotta walk out to the sidewalk to get it to work. I didn't have to do that with my 4G. When you're looking at these coverage and drop calls, is the fact those calls didn't drop under 4G at all part of the equation?
Actually, I'm glad you asked that question because I was going to talk about in-building reception. I've got a lot of experience with that. But there are lots of solutions. There are some buildings where just for any of the Gs, just do not get inside that building. For example, buildings with rebar, metal roofs, low E-glass, those have huge amounts of attenuation. And so the solution there, and it's a solution that I've implemented for people in the past, is to get a booster. And so you can have an antenna outside and then you have an antenna inside and your reception is perfect. It's beautiful. So that's one solution. And you know that when you go into certain tunnels, like in some of the Boston tunnels, you get great reception. How do they do that? Well, they use boosters. Another thing that you might want to consider, which is what I use also, is Wi-Fi calling. Wi-Fi calling works fantastic. And so if you have Wi-Fi calling turned on your phone and you don't have a signal from the cell tower, you get perfect reception from Wi-Fi and it works great. So that would be my recommendation, is to simply go into your phone, turn on Wi-Fi calling. It's one little switch, and you'll find that you do have coverage that you need, assuming that you're connected to a Wi-Fi network in your building, in your work. You won't have to go outside again.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? You have a question? Please.
Kent, this is Peter on the board. At our last meeting, we had several community members, fire chief included, that indicated there is a need for improved cell service and a need for better communications. He did it from an operational sense. So I know you're talking about definitive details, but certainly listening to him, giving us examples of where he needs better service, and other community members who indicated they did not have good service, are part of what we've heard. So, for me, it's hard to sift through that. Everything's fine, yet we're having people who provide community services for fire safety that are saying they're not.
Well, I'm really surprised to hear that. I've worked with our local fire department on their communications needs. And they all fire departments and police departments that I know of have their own independent communication networks. And so, and the same thing is that if you're talking about their being able to use a cell phone in their buildings, well, you can use a repeater or something like that, a booster. And they work fine, and I know that from experience. So there are almost always other ways of doing things other than putting up a huge tower that's going to change the nature of your community and also make it so that some people cannot avoid being exposed. There's this issue, and I didn't talk about that, and that's called, it had been called electromagnetic hypersensitivity. It's real, and that's what we found on the commission. That's where there are people, when they get near a cell phone or any type of RF generating device, they can't be near. They get headaches, they get nauseous. It's a very real thing. Now, people in industry will say, no, it's all in their heads. It's not. It's very real, and that was a finding of the commission. So you don't want to simply put up that tower, and that's really why I'm here and saying there are always alternatives that can give you coverage. You saw the level of signal that you need to have a robust call, and it's not anywhere near the type of exposures that people would get living near to a cell tower.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Alana.
Alana Kirschenbaum, 167 South Shelburne Road. I just want to acknowledge that I spoke last week around my in-depth interviews with the fire department in Greenfield, with the police department, and the emergency responders, the ambulance contractor. And in all of those conversations, no one indicated to me that there were significant gaps or any gaps that they were struggling with cellular coverage. And they use a radio system as a backup. The manager of the dispatch center of the ambulance contractors said to me, and I quoted it last week, that the coverage in Greenfield is good. There are no issues, even up in the hills. So what I'm trying to say is that we had the fire chief say that to us last week. I interviewed those people in those different emergency responder departments who contradicted that. And because of the contradiction, we need the town of Greenfield could take a deeper look at where are the coverage gaps and really explore this in a comprehensive way. The question we are looking at regarding this tower at this location is not the answer. I mean, this is AT&T is coming in, they're claiming a coverage gap that to me has not been substantiated with data. a significant coverage gap. And these are, you don't want to conflate what the fire department chief said with, oh, because he said that, we really need to look at approving this tower. They're two different issues, and I hope we can see the differentiation here. If there are people who want good coverage in Greenfield, I acknowledge that, I respect it, people deserve it. But there are ways to achieve that in ways that do not harm neighborhoods and have the impacts that we're talking about. And I'm not just talking about the health piece that Ken is talking about, which is significant for many of us here. There are other issues with property devaluation, the aesthetics of seeing a 100-foot tower looming over the sky for so many residents, safety issues. There are many, many things. Ken was talking about the home internet market and the jamming of lines and the cybersecurity issues. So I understand that the fire chief brought this up, that he pointed to 2 areas in Greenfield that he has seen some areas that need improvement. I understand that, but please, I just want us to differentiate the two and focus on this application at this location. There may be there are many other ways to improve cell service in Greenfield without putting this 170-foot tower in an area that is not zoned for it and requires a variance.
Yes, ma'am.
Suzanne Fleury, 97 Newton Street. We're right across the street from the storage unit. We saw the balloon test go up the other day. It's going to completely ruin the aesthetic of the area from what our location. It's insanely obvious. It's far above the tree line. I work in IT. I work from home 3 days a week. I have no problem with cell phone coverage. I use Wi-Fi calling inside of my house, and when I step outside my house, my service is better. I have not experienced dropped calls. I can see the highway. I can walk to the highway within 5 minutes. I can walk to the off-ramp within 2. I don't see the need for this.
Right, I'm sorry. Yes,
Hi,
I'll go back. I'll get back.
Stacy Bear, 79 Newton Street,
Can you spell your last name for the record?
GIGUER.
Thank you. Did you say Newton Street?
Yes, 79.
Thank you.
I also did the balloon test on Saturday, and it confirmed to me that that tower is from my front door. It's going to be about at my 1 o'clock, very close to my house. And it's going to tower over the trees. I definitely have some safety concerns. There's a freight train that rumbles through the neighborhood several times a day. That has not been discussed. And I understand that there are provisions built into the tower to supposedly allow it to fall out of every point, but I'm not sure how much I trust that, or pieces flying off the top of it from such a height. I additionally have concerns about the evaluation of my property. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just taking notes, so I'll be right with the next person. Yes, sir.
Oh, my name is Ken Hine. I live at 181 Ferry Street, where cell tower proposed. I have 2 young children. One boy is 2, and one is 5. And no expert. I've been around for a long time, 77 years old, and at one point in my career, I was responsible for building one nuclear site, police security force for a whole year. During that time, we took lots of courses in health physics and the danger of what the real dangers were of low level radiation. Every day we wore dosimeters, okay, which measured how much radiation you got. And every day we were sure that you're not getting enough radiation, get more from the sun than you could, which is, it was all nonsense. Okay, it was all. If they were all surveys, they've done that moved in the direction of Beacon, the company that owned the power plant at the time. Just coincidentally, at that time, 1980, Green Mile Island happened, and plans to build Pilgrim 2 doesn't were shelved. And Pilgrim 2 never got built. And that was because there were a couple of reasons. One of them was that Pilgrim 1 had the worst safety rating in the whole country. Okay. We would bring people in to do work in the nuclear reactor, okay, and they would go into areas that were hot. They would work for maybe a week, and then they had to take the rest of the year off because their accumulation of low-level radiation was so high that it was called killed. Now, again, they told us time and time again, there was nothing to worry about. But every day I would get a dosimeter reading and I would write it down. I went to my doctor because my hair was falling out at that time and I had hair. And it's left weak, but I don't blame it on the nuclear side, I blame both. But I went to my doctor and he said, if I were you, I'd find another job. Something that doesn't expose you to low-level radiation. I don't, for one, the one reason alone I stick to my mind is that I have children. And that means they're gonna be exposed to low-level radiation that they would not normally be exposed to. And I'm not talking about sunshine, I'm talking about real low-level radiation. I don't want that for them. I'm at the point where if this tower is approved, I know my property values are going to go down. I'm gonna move. I'm not gonna be within the area of that cell tower. Just like the people who moved away from Pilgrim 1, okay? Years and years later, surveys later showed that people who lived just in proximity got cancer. Why? Oh, it was low-level radiation. Doses, but after a while. I mean, and that's just, I'm speaking from experience here, okay? When I first got there at the nuclear site, I was terrified. There was lead bricks put around puddles in places where they had leaked. And if you walked underneath the power lines with a light bulb, it was kind of a joke. When they were generating energy, the light bulb would light right up, boom. So what you can't see can hurt you, okay? I don't care what they're selling you on that.
Thank you.
I just wanted to make a suggestion because we had our presenters scheduled to speak first today. That's what we were hoping. So I was going to suggest that if there are people who have comments and they cannot stay like later for other public comments, maybe you should say yours if you need to leave, and then we could get back to the presentation. I just want to propose that. I don't know if Ken has finished his presentation. I know we still have Andrew.
Yes, Michael.
I just want to point out that Mr. Campanelli or Attorney Campanelli has got his hand raised for a little bit.
Yes, it's
Wanted to make you aware of that.
Thanks. Attorney Campanelli, is that on there because you want to speak?
Yes,
Okay, thank you. Speak.
thank you. Good evening. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Andrew.
Oh,
Campanelli.
hold it. Is it to make your presentation or did you want to?
Yes. Oh,
Okay.
yes. Well, I wanted to make a comment early, but it's a little late for it, so I can wait for the presentation. It's up to you.
I'm going to ask you to just hold one more. You've been very patient, so I'm going to use your patience to my advantage.
No problem.
Okay, you folks this is your presentation. You know who these people are. We'll stay here and listen for a reasonable amount of time, which for me for you is a long period of time. So I need somebody to be in control. You seem to be in control of the events. You want to ask what?
Can I make one more comment as part of the group comments?
Yes.
My name is Bojana Dragicevic, 210 High Street. I am nowhere near the area where the tower apparently is going to go up, but I wanted to bring to your attention a case that is currently being fought not far from here. Maybe some of you are familiar with Pittsfield. There's a group of residents in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, who has been battling a very, very long and laborious case with Verizon Tower going up in their own neighborhood. And the tower in 2020 was built in a residential neighborhood. Shortly after, the residents who live near the tower had started experiencing health issues, including children. The uptick of illness has it has increased so much that 2 years later, the Board of Health of Pittsfield had to be involved. And I will read something just so that I don't misinterpret their information. Basically, the group of residents has sued Verizon and has asked them to either remove the tower or lower the emissions. And I'm just trying to exemplify to you that once the tower goes up, it's almost impossible to get them to change or take it down because they hide behind the FLCC outdated emission laws that, as our presenter had mentioned, have not been updated since 1986, way before we had cell phones and wireless radiation. So they're absolutely inadequate. So in 2 years later, in 2022, the Board of Health in Pittsfield, this is what it says: in February 2022, the board, after reaching the health impacts of radio frequency radiation emitted by the tower, issued a cease and desist order to Verizon unless the telecom giant agreed to discuss removing or relocating the tower. Verizon, of course, sued. And they have been in limbo ever since. So if you make a decision to build that tower in a residential area, you're basically convicting these people to either relocate or for them to become permanently sick. And I'll just read one last quote from one of the residents who is the plaintiff and who has been injured by the cell tower. The injured neighbors still living in Shackletown want to live safely in their own houses without feeling dizzy, nauseous, without experiencing palpitations, aphids, cardiac issues, migraines, and other neurological symptoms. We have been begging for help for the last 4 years, 7 months and 21 days, and up until the Board of Health became involved, all we had is finger pointing on whose responsibility it is to deal with the community health problem. It feels like Verizon just wants us to shut up and die. So I think we have a precedent of what happens when a cell tower goes up in a residential neighborhood where it doesn't have any business of being in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that information. Okay, so Attorney Campanelli is, yes, oh, I'm sorry. I left my eye behind my head.
Yeah, I know you didn't get it. Can I ask your permission to film it? I haven't filmed it.
Are you on the paper?
I know.
All right, just have to let me know what you're doing. Okay, thank you for letting me know. Yeah, just to allow for people's rights to their privacy. That's if you have something.
I have a question.
Yes.
For Kent Chamberlain. Eric Green on the zoning board of appeals. My question is this. Have you heard about other bodies such as this zoning board or planning boards who have successfully challenged proposals to put up a cell tower, and where there was a question about the gap in coverage? And if so, what data was used to successfully challenge the claims of the cell phone companies that they had a gap in coverage that needed to be filled, so that we can have some guidance on what kind of data we need to have at hand to make a challenge if that's appropriate?
Well, Attorney Campanelli probably can provide you with some good information there himself. But what yes, the answer is yes. I've seen it happen in multiple municipalities where people are, first of all, are unaware of the harms of wireless radiation. So they are thinking along the lines of initially, like what I heard somebody say a moment ago, and that is, yeah, they want to have greater cell phone coverage. That seems to be a priority. But then once people hear about the harms of wireless radiation, then they take action. So I've seen people be successful at the grassroots level. And one way to do it is to go into the claimed areas of gap. Just have people do this, go in, make a phone call from within the gap areas, and then, sign an affidavit, say, hey, I was here and I was able to place a phone call. And that to a large degree discredits what's being said or in the claims of gap area's existence. So that's just one thing. You also want to have a well-known and very successful attorney like Attorney Campanelli to kind of guide you through that process. What is it that you need to collect? What is it that you need to do to be successful in denying a tower? And people are doing it. So it's not like you'd be the first. No, not by any means. Lots of communities have done that. And then after that.
Yeah, my question was specific, and perhaps Attorney Campanelli will address this, to challenges that have survived the appeals process in the courts. Because there are plenty of places that have turned down towers, but that was then overturned by the courts as not being sufficient.
Yeah, I think Attorney Campanelli has handed up because he probably wants to address it.
Very
But, again, Attorney Campanelli, your patience is just so thrills me. So how about Kent, are you ready to wrap up? Or are you going to stick around in case there are other questions, or what's?
Well, actually, I have to leave. I'm going out of town, and so I need to go pack and have dinner.
Okay, that's good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming.
Welcome.
No other questions, right? Everybody's good? Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Attorney Campanelli, I'm going to ask you for like the gold standard of patience, which is that we're going to have to take a 5-minute break because you could see how old we all are. So we will be back and then we're going to be ready. Obviously, otherwise our legs would be moving up and down, So, okay, let's take a 5-minute break.
Thank you. David.
We'll figure that out. This might be a little better than mine. Yes. That's my. It'll hit the editors first and. It's true. Very important. Yeah. Very important. This is a gap problem. There's so many ways to solve it. So many ways to solve it. It doesn't involve. Just often. Why not the whole people? You gotta pay the spot. It's the whole people, but why couldn't it be the whole people? Why is it pushing right over there?
Then my shoes on the floor. But then
I also. You were other locations. Desired here. Street west for location. Other possibilities. Like at the third round. Like the Home Depot lot.
was gonna say, there were 12, yeah. That's like when I walked, and I don't know where to get you a copy of it, but it's in, it's in.
It's warm out there. Yeah, it's getting warm. That's why I turned that off.
I know.
That's on medium.
Oh, you have to buy this wow.
Is your life you're doing this?
Yes.
You get too young to retire.
No, never too young to retire.
You go all what, 80%?
No. You have to work 40 years to get 80%.
God.
Yeah, I mean, some people in Greenfield never reached 80%, but they've never worked anywhere else their whole lives.
Like here, yeah.
Yeah, we have traveled the world and worked in different states.
You merge all that time.
No, only Massachusetts. But I'll have 27 years still in Massachusetts.
I keep telling everybody, it's an individual decision. You wake up one morning and you know when you want to retire.
Yeah. I mean, work to me has always been a job, not a career.
No, I enjoy it.
Yeah. So like, people, their whole life is a job. It's like, man, it's the only reason I work is I have to pay bills. Otherwise, I wouldn't be working.
Oh, I just look forward to going to work all the time.
Yeah, see, I don't.
Oh, then you kind of get out.
But I never look forward to it. Not one day. Yeah. I don't like work.
I called my wife at 2:30 in the morning, 91 in Hartford. I was 66 years old. I said, "You all right?" She said, "Yeah, I'm retiring." I'm down here with a crew. We lost a 5-row on the highway. One guy was 10 years younger than me with a back hip. Another guy was 20 years younger than me with a bad shoulder. Another guy had a bad neck. Nice yoga guy in the crew. I said, "I'm getting out of here."
What were you doing?
Fiber optic.
Installation?
State of Connecticut was the biggest customer.
I just read a posting from LinkedIn, the jobs like radiation therapist and nuclear technician had 60 million job openings last year, or a whole bunch of jobs. I'm like,
Not us getting the answers we need.
When is our next? The last one that I had. This was the main one at this point for us.
And make it.
It's not their concern. It is ours. Okay. Thank you.
yeah. September.
Yeah.
We have to be done by the end of May, right?
Yes. May 30th is the cutoff.
Okay.
But yeah.
Couldn't they ask for another person?
Oh, yeah, they could, you both sign an agreement with the board and they can extend it.
No.
We have to make every effort to get to the finish line by the end of May.
I
If
realize.
it's possible to get to the end of the finish line by the end of May, then we'll all know it and we'll figure it out, but.
Are you optimistic?
It depends. Yes, I am on some levels that, let's put it this way, I'm optimistic that we will move forward in good faith to get to the right answers. And wherever that leads us, that's right. But all I can say, how's that?
We all know your summary was really.
Was it good?
I thought it was very good. I pointed out to them.
That's because I've been learning.
Yeah. And that's what we've got to base our decision on. You know,
It's not around the cell phone tower, but the development out in 361. It was the same kind of thing where they.
But he has
Our procedures, process or the contact.
I'm happy to do that.
But they don't. We have our concerns because of what we're allowed to do. People need, they have different, they have different concerns. Rightfully so. If I lived in the neighborhood, I'd have a different concern.
Not the missing tic tac.
Tech ladies.
Okay, stay fresh.
Cell towers are going out.
Oh, Bishop.
They knew that it was impacting.
Alcohol, we're starting.
Passes across the way.
You're just leaving the middle of some of your holidays here started.
Mark. Actually, you know what? I will take that if you don't mind.
It's fair. If I didn't want to share, we kept it tucked quietly in my purse.
So generous, thank you.
I don't want to start with that.
Hear a story that.
Some days I feel.
Went up outside in the middle of what, don't be happy with bench and miles.
Attorney Camp. Need to finish, go ahead. You good? Attorney Campanelli, thank you again in sincerity for being so patient. Your turn, go.
Okay, thank you. So I'll be very brief in my introduction. My name is Andrew Campanelli.
Hold it, another. Okay.
Can we please respect our speakers and allow them to have the screen so everyone can see that? So we have to change the view. Just like we have done with.
Okay, just this, please. If you ask a question, I'm happy to help you, but that's not what you're doing. So what is it you guys would like me to do?
So as we've done with other speakers, we have.
Well, it doesn't matter what we do with other speakers. What would you like us to do with this?
Can we enlarge it so we can see him?
Thank you. Yes, I think we can try to do that. Okay, Eric, can we try to do that?
I can try to do it. I can't guarantee I can do it, but let's see. View should be the option. Let's see, speaker.
Hey.
There we go. It wasn't hard.
Well,
Parking spot.
You all set?
Right when you are we good?
Good.
Okay. So again, I am an attorney. I've been handling wireless cases, regulations since the Telecommunications Act was adopted back in 1996. So it's over 30 years. I've handled cases not just across the state of New York and Massachusetts, but across the entire United States of America. I've dealt with every type of cell phone issue you can possibly think of. So let me start with some very intelligent questions that were asked by members of the board with regard to evidence. Dr. Chamberlain was correct that this applicant has failed to provide you with any probative evidence to establish there's an actual need for this facility, either for a significant gap in personal wireless services or a capacity deficiency. Now, and I hope that each of you have seen the memorandum in opposition, which I previously submitted, along with the exhibits in opposition. Normally, if there was an actual gap in service, what a carrier would do is they would come to you and say, look, based upon the topography in your city, the minimum signal strength we need to maintain reliable wireless service is minus 98 dBi. They will then do a drive test where they record the actual signal strength throughout the city. Then they give you the signal strength data. That shows you three things: the existence of a gap, the locations of the gap, and the boundaries of the gap. They didn't do that here, with good reason, because there are no gaps. Attached to the exhibits that I've submitted to you as Exhibit F is the actual coverage map from the FCC showing that AT&T has no gaps in service at the precise location where they want to build this facility. The signal strength does not drop too low to maintain a call. In response, and this is particularly troublesome, the applicant's attorney sent a response dated April 8th and pulled what I call a bait and switch. In their response, trying to explain away the fact that according to the FCC, there are no gaps in coverage. And by the way, they have to provide, AT&T has to provide the coverage data to the FCC to get federal grant money. And when they do so under threat of criminal penalties for filing false instruments. So usually the FCC's maps are the most accurate maps of coverage that you can possibly get. So in response, they claim that if I would have looked, there would have been disclaimer. And if I look at the FCC's map with the disclaimer, it shows that the FCC's map is close to the map they presented to you, but it's not. If you look at the map they presented you, right on the top, it says FCC National Broadband Map in-vehicle mobile coverage. So I provided you the actual map for their cellular phone coverage. And in response, they pull a bait and switch and they give you a map for their broadband coverage. They are two completely different things. You are not required to allow them to build a cell tower for broadband. This is exactly what Dr. Chamberlain was talking about. This has nothing to do with cellular coverage. Now, one of your board members asked about what evidence can we get? Well, here's the way it works. Under federal law, you get to decide what evidence you can require an applicant to produce to prove, number one, that they have a significant gap in personal wireless services that requires the building of this tower, or a capacity deficiency. You also get to choose the weight to give any piece of evidence they submit to you. This applicant doesn't get to walk in and say, we have a gap, so you got to give it to us. It doesn't work that way. So let's talk about the evidence you can ask for. You absolutely positively can ask for the dropped call records. They're called denial of service records. I know that because I get them on a regular basis. In fact, as we speak today, I'm representing the county of Monmouth in New Jersey in a case Verizon Wireless versus the county of Monmouth, New Jersey. It's in the United States District Court. The index number is 23-CV-18091. I did not handle the zoning application case. After the zoning application was denied, Verizon sued Monmouth, claiming that they had a capacity deficiency and thus the denial was an effective prohibition on the TCA. And I walked into federal court, New Jersey, and said if they claim they have a capacity deficiency, they have to produce the dropped call records. And the federal judge ordered them to produce the dropped call records. And there were thousands of pages of records regarding alleged dropped calls, which shows they don't really have a gap. They were claiming that existed. So you absolutely have the right to demand they provide probative evidence of the capacity deficiency. And those are denial of service records, i.e. dropped call records. And they can do it very easily. They can hit a few keystrokes into AT&T's computer, and they can print out a list of all dropped calls to any geographic location for any chronological period in time. Now, what about claims of a gap in service? The same thing. You can demand actual hard data. You can require them to do a drive test. I would ask you to look at the Extenet case, very important case for your purposes. Extenet Systems versus the Village of Flower Hills. The citation is 617 F sub 3rd, 125, Eastern District of New York, 72922. This was one of my cases. Extenet went to the Village of Flower Hills and wanted to build wireless facilities every 150 feet in a residential neighborhood for broadband, claiming it was for 5G. They refused to provide data other than data regarding 5G service. And their attorneys produced evidence claiming that they established that Verizon had a gap in its 5G service. Based upon their recommendations and their lack of evidence, the village turned down the application. Verizon sued in federal court. Here's the citation. The court threw it out. The court said to prove that there's a gap in service, you can't just prove there's a gap in 5G service. The applicant has to prove that one of its customers cannot use its phone to connect to a landline. That's what they said. And the court explained how it works. If, for argument's sake, Verizon has a gap in 5G service, and someone's driving through the village on a phone call using 5G service, and the signal strength drops too low to maintain the call, your phone will simply downshift to 4G or 3G or 2G, and the user won't even know it. And so simply proving that you have a gap in one frequency, which is precisely what they're doing here, does not establish a significant gap in service as a matter of law. It's clear. So you have the right to say to the applicant, you got a gap in service? Give us the drive test data. Give us the actual recorded signal strengths. You got a capacity deficiency? Give us the denial service of records, also known as the drop call records. You have the right to demand it. And more importantly, you have the right to choose how much weight to give whatever evidence they've given you, and the propagation maps they've given you, I respectfully submit to you, are nonsense. They don't address all of the frequencies at which AT&T provides its services. They claim that to have good service in the city, they need a signal strength of between 400% and 21% higher than the signal strength that AT&T needs to provide wireless services anywhere else in the United States. It's nonsense. And just so you understand, the way the dBA measurements work is the closer you get to 0, the stronger the signal strength. Every 3 dBm you change, the signal strength doubles. So in most of my cases, all across the country, Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile say the signal strength they need for reliable wireless service is minus 98 dBm. If you go down to minus 95, it's twice as strong. If you go to minus 93, it's 400% stronger. They're claiming they need minus 83. Why didn't a signal strength 2,000% stronger in your city to provide wireless service than they need anywhere else in the United States? If you can figure that out, you're smarter than I am. Now, the first thing you're dealing with is a variance application. The variance in law is very clear. Oh, let me back up. The reason this is so important and why you have to make a factual determination as to whether or not this applicant has proven, number one, it suffers from either a significant gap in personal wireless services or capacity deficiency, and number two, its proposed facility is the least intrusive means, in fact, the only viable means of remedying that gap, and there are no possible alternative locations, is because if and only if they prove to your satisfaction both of those things, then nothing else matters. You have to grant the application, even if it violates every other section of your code. But you get to make those factual determinations, not them. Now, putting that aside, because I don't think there's any probative evidence through which they can claim to have established those things, you look at the standard for a variance. You know what they are. It has to be a substantial hardship by the applicant. Without proof that they actually need this to provide wireless services, there is no substantial hardship. Also, they have to show, it's their burden, that granting the application won't nullify or substantially deviate from the purpose of the zoning regulations. There are reasons you adopted a special use permit requirement, site plan approval requirement, and distance and height limitations for, and they were to prevent the precise types of adverse impacts that the irresponsible placement of this facility at this location will inflict upon the nearby homeowners. You know what they are. Number one, you're gonna have an adverse aesthetic impact. It's clear. I cited in my brief the OmniPoint case. How can you prove that there'll be an adverse aesthetic impact? Well, federal court, OmniPoint, which is cited in the brief, said the person's in the best position to both know and understand both the nature and the extent of adverse aesthetic impacts that homeowners will suffer are the homeowners themselves. And so they provided you with letters which rise to the level of substantial evidence. And they talk about how the colossal proposed tower, equivalent to a 16 or 17-story tower building, would be visible from all the side and rear windows of our home. These are the precise types of adverse aesthetic impacts you adopted your special use permit requirement and site plan requirements to prevent in the first place. So granting this variance, much less the special use permit, not only violate your code, it would inflict upon the nearby homes the precise types of adverse impacts that your code provisions were adopted to prevent in the first instance. Then if guys, you got the fall zone. There's a reason that all jurisdictions across the United States impose setback zones for cell towers. In most cases, the standard is 110% of the height of the tower. It's to protect against the dangers of structural failure, ice fall, debris fall, fire. Please go to my memo, the exhibits on my memo, and take a look at Exhibit B. Exhibit B shows many examples. My favorite is the Oswego cell tower collapse. This is a 165-foot cell tower that was supposed to be able to collapse on itself, that only 2 weeks after it was built, went from being 165 feet tall to being 172 foot long, crushing a fire chief's vehicle in the process. And I always ask town board members and village board members, planning board and ZBAs, if they can't build the tower to stand up in the first place, what makes you think they're going to be any better at making it fail the way they want it to fail? And the answer is they can't. Look at Exhibit B and you see plenty of examples where cell towers collapse to a distance greater than the actual height of the tower. So there is no way they can justify obtaining a variance for relief from the minimum distance necessary to protect the surrounding properties from the potential danger of structural failures, which happen on a regular basis. By the way, if anybody has any questions, please ask me. You guys asked some very, very good questions, which shows you know what you're doing. And I really appreciate that. Sometimes I deal with boards that really just don't understand the process. So, and anytime somebody has a question, please let me know. There's talk about the fire department or the police department needing this. There is no evidence whatsoever in the record that your fire department or police department would derive any benefit whatsoever from this tower. Let's talk about it, okay? As many of you may or may not know, fire departments and police departments work on their own frequencies. They use UHF and VHF. And if in fact there are gaps in those services, you have no idea if there are or where they are. The way that should be addressed is if you have concerns that either the UHF or the VHF coverage for either the fire department or the police department has gaps, it's the same thing. They do a drive test. They record the signal strength for their coverage, and it would show you gaps. If and only if they provide that coverage data, are you then in a position to figure out if either your fire department or police department is going to derive any benefit whatsoever from this tower? And if to the extent they want to use cell phone coverage or cellular coverage to make a call, well, we're right back where we started. There is no hard data, no probative data whatsoever showing actual signal strengths anywhere within the city, no hard data showing any gaps, the location of the gaps, or the boundaries of the gaps. Now, bear with me 1 second, I'm sorry. As far as the adverse aesthetic impacts, I heard the applicant say at one of these many meetings where they droned on for hours, oh, it's going to be totally shielded by foliage. This tower is going to tower 100 feet above the tree line. It's gonna dwarf any tree in close proximity. It is physically impossible for anything to shield a 17-story tower at the location they want it. Not to mention that once it's built, if you permit it, under the Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act of 2012, if the applicant wants to increase the height after it's built, they can increase the height an additional 20 feet and you will be powerless to stop them. So if you think the fall zone is not sufficient now, or the adverse aesthetic impact is bad now, think about when they raise it to 190. Think about the potential there. And by the way, based upon the drawings and the base being 32.6 feet deep, the base is designed to accommodate a tower of up to 199 feet. So that being said, I respectfully submit number one, they haven't shown a substantial hardship, which is one of the first criteria for granting a variance under your law. And they certainly haven't shown that granting the application would not substantially deviate from the purpose of the zoning regulations. You're gonna have adverse aesthetic impacts. You're gonna have a property value adverse impact. It's gonna be inconsistent with the character of the neighborhood. You have an insufficient fall zone. If any of you have not seen it or read it yet, please read my memorandum in opposition. Because I make sure that I guide local boards so that if they choose to deny an application, they do so in a way that does not violate the Telecommunications Act of 1996. There's just one further point I'd like to address, and it has to do with one of the questions that one of the board members asked about citations to cases where a local board turned down an application and it withstood challenge in federal court. Because when local municipal attorneys do research on federal courts, they don't know it, but they look at the wrong universe. And I'll explain to you what that means. I have never had a case in 30 years where I created a proper record before a local zoning board. And I don't care if it was a planning board, planning council, ZBA, board of trustees. When I counseled a local board or appeared before a board and advocated for denial and a proper record was created, sufficient evidence was entered into the record to serve as a basis for the denial, and they denied the application. They never got sued. If there are 10 applications and in 8 of them, the board denies it pursuant to their local laws and consistent with the procedural requirements of the Telecommunications Act, they deny it, that's the end of it. It never makes it to federal court. The only time a town, county, or village or city gets sued in federal court are in those cases where they didn't understand what they had to do. And so they violate the TCA and they get sued. And so in 80% of the cases where they get sued, they lose, but only because those are the cases where they violated the TCA. So the pitfall for local municipal attorneys is when they go to their classic research tools like Lexis or Westlaw, and they look it up, they say, oh my God, 80% of the time the town gets sued, it's because they only bring the cases when you don't have a proper record before you. And you, I respectfully submit, have a proper record. This applicant has not placed you in a position to ascertain to any degree, number one, that this tower is necessary. Number two, that anyone would derive any benefit whatsoever from the tower being built. And number three, that this tower would in any way, form, or shape be consistent with smart planning. Your goal should not be to stop cell towers. They are a necessary evil. But your goal should be the same as every other local government across the United States, which regulate wireless facilities and adopt ordinances just like yours to achieve 3 purposes simultaneously. You want to have these towers strategically placed so that you will enable the carriers to saturate your city with coverage, while at the same time minimizing the number of towers you need to provide that coverage and avoid unnecessarily redundant wireless infrastructure. And number 2, prevent the unnecessary adverse impacts due to the irresponsible placement of wireless facilities like this one, and to preserve property values. And right now, this applicant has not given you any probative evidence to suggest, or even to place you in a position to figure out if this would be consistent with smart planning. Because if there are gaps, and this doesn't cover the gaps, they're coming back 6 months from now for another tower, probably for broadband as well. But that's what's happening here. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your patience. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you. Before I recognize you, sir, anybody on the board have any questions? Take advantage of the fact that I looked over here, but I see. Do you have a question?
I do, but
Is it a question of the attorney?
yes.
Please ask the question.
Eric, thank you for this amazing presentation.
Repeat your name again for the record.
It's Milan Dragisevich.
Thank you.
10 High Street.
Thank you, Milan. Thank you.
Thank you for this really persuasive, diligent presentation. I have a question about what you said about the bait and switch about the 5G. Meaning that just because something is 5G, you said it can downshift to 4G, 3G, you'll still get coverage and not necessarily know it. So it's not a question of the 5G. Can you go over that one more time?
Sure. So most of your wireless carriers, well, AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, they provide wireless coverage on at least 10 different frequencies. And so there are 10 different frequencies upon which an end user of their services, a customer who's got a contract with T-Mobile or AT&T, there's 10 different frequencies on which they can use their cell phone to connect to a landline. And this was all addressed by the federal district court in the ExteNet versus the Village of Flower Hills. And so they went before Flower Hills and they said, we have to put these wireless facilities every 150 feet in a residential neighborhood. There were like 40 of them. And so they said, here's proof that we have gaps in our 5G coverage. And the board, based upon the record I created, denied the application. And they sued in federal court. And the court said, wait a minute, you have to admit that there's nothing in the record about your 4G coverage or 3G coverage. And you also have to admit that if someone is driving through the village on their phone using 5G signal strength, and the 5G signal strength drops too low to maintain the call, the user's phone will downshift to a different frequency. It can downshift from 5G to 4G to 3G to 2G to 1G, and the phone user won't know it. Their phone call will just continue. And so the court said, to prove a gap in service, you have to prove that Verizon's customer can't use their phone to connect to a landline. In this applicant's application, they've only provided 1 or 2 frequencies of the 10 or 11 that this carrier uses. So as a matter of law, they've not established the existence of a significant gap, and they certainly haven't established that one of its customers can't use a phone to connect to a landline. And backing it up with a broadband map, which has nothing to do with cellular coverage, proves absolutely nothing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Name and address, please.
David Levitt, 4 Fairview Terrace. Can it be so subjective that aesthetically we could win because 8 people that are inside of the tower feel that it degrades their peace or their whatever it be, that aesthetics affects them from that? I know it's very subjective. And so I question that. Second aspect I have is we only know of this site. I think in a prior meeting or 2, there may have been other sites that they considered, but this is the prime location for them because maybe it's the least financial outlay. And maybe there are other places that would cost them more, but still do the same service, like Home Depot's lot or the fairgrounds property. Yeah, they might have to rent the land in perpetuity and pay more, but it's less residential per se. Thank you.
Can I answer that or respond?
Please.
Okay. So it's critical for the board to understand that the grounds for denying this application does not come from the Telecommunications Act. It comes from your local zoning code. And so the best I tell local government boards is put aside the Telecommunications Act right now. And now just look into your local zoning code and treat this as any other 17-story tower. If someone came before you and asked for a variance to build a 17-story tower, how you would treat it. Now, aesthetics is a huge impact in terms of zoning. We spend billions of dollars on Home Depot and Lowe's for aesthetic purposes. Federal courts recognize that. And so federal courts across the entire United States recognize that potential adverse aesthetic impacts are a perfectly legal, valid ground to deny an application for the installation of a cell tower if the adverse aesthetic impact is deemed significant enough by the ZBA, who should treat this like any other zoning application. The same goes for failure to have a sufficient sprawl zone around the tower, or reduction in property values, or even that the proposed location being so close to residential homes would be inconsistent with the residential character of the neighborhood. Any one of these is a valid legal grounds to deny the application.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have a question?
I just have a quick question.
please.
Here, 65 Hudson Street.
Thank you.
I just want to know, did you say that the roof of a cell tower goes down 32 feet?
Yes, the standard for a cell tower like this, the base is a cylinder, usually 6 foot in diameter. Typically goes down 32.5 feet or 33.5 feet, depending
Oh, the
upon the ground.
whole cylinder goes down 30 feet. Okay.
Attorney Campanelli, were you, when you said 32 feet, were you generalizing or had you looked at the engineering for this application?
I'd have to go back. I thought I saw 33.5 on this one, but I admit I haven't looked at it now in a couple of months.
But your comment, like the question, I just want to make sure we're apples and apples. Your comment before, the source of that comment, I thought came from your memory of reviewing this project, not generally that all cell towers go down 32 feet.
I believe that I saw the base because I looked at it trying to figure out if this tower is going to be 170 or 190. I could be mistaken because I've handled probably 40 cell tower cases between now and the past 2 months. But their plans are going to show it. Just look at their plans.
Yeah, no, I just didn't want people to be leaving with some general assertion. And I didn't think you made that general assertion. So I think he was commenting, and those plans are on public record, so.
Correct.
Fine, and I'm sure Attorney, not tonight, but Attorney Rosen will talk about that at the next meeting, we can learn. But that information, I believe he was talking about our particular model.
I'm not going to guess. I'm going to pull them.
All right, you have some time there. Are you asking him a question or you're making a comment?
It's a question, but he probably doesn't know the answer. When is this being decided by? When it's being decided?
Yeah.
And have there been other, and I just feel like this is a very, nothing, have there been other sites that have already been denied, or they've gone through and said, this is the best one, but there's a couple others that if you say no to this one, then we're gonna pursue that?
Okay, thanks for the question. Did everybody hear the question? I don't want to speak for Attorney Rosen's client. My understanding is that through a method, they rejected other sites, numerous other sites, and came to us. And there were different sites that had different reasons.
In green or outside?
Some in Greenfield and some just outside of Greenfield. Again, I don't want to be, it's not fair for me to say that, but like up on the trail, for example, and I think that's still green. You know, the tower. And then there's Deerfield right below us, so I'd have to look at the map, but it's generally in a circle that starts, I think, somewhere around, actually, I don't want to say anything. So what was the second question? Oh, when we're going to decide it? And so federal law requires us to move at a certain pace. And so we've kind of built momentum in this process. There were a couple of months of not really being able to sort of get started. And now we're into the spring. So it's been a written agreement between the board and the applicant that by May 30th, we will make a decision. Now, I'm going to say this. If we think we need more information, we will ask the applicant for more information. And if that requires an extension, then we'll see how that plays out. But the thrust of it is that we're all trying to act in good faith to get that to the second.
If I can just add to that, that May 30th date actually is an extension of that month. Just so that everyone.
Well, okay, that's not really true because you as the applicant agreed to every extension that we did at the end of the meeting. So
My point, Mr. Chair, was that we have been cooperative with the board.
yeah, okay, I will concur with that sentiment.
Yeah.
Did I help you answer your question? Did I answer your question?
Is there,
End of
there's
May.
not in Greenfield that they're going to pursue if this is denied for some reason?
I don't know. That's a business decision, but the zoning board's the zoning board is being presented with what they've done and comparing that to what Attorney Campanelli and Attorney Rosen have presented to us that they believe is the law. And so that's all we can look at least as far as I understand. Yeah, I'm gonna go to the board before, just for courtesy, because
Just to provide a little additional context, I would say 3 or 4 meetings ago, you go back on the town's calendar and find the Zoom video, there was some discussion of the other sites that they had considered prior to submitting this application and what led them to submit this application. I don't remember the exact meeting date, but in the past 2 months, if you just looked through those ZBA meetings, you would be able to find one where a few of other like hypothetical sites were discussed and kind of the path that led them to choose the current site there.
I would agree with that. So that would be
The
helpful.
maps were provided by AT&T of what the pros and cons of the strength of signal were at each of those sites.
If you've missed those meetings, anybody here, I would suggest you do them and you'll get the answers to those questions. I don't want to paraphrase, but thank you for that.
Mr. Chairman, just for clarification's sake, we don't post the Zoom meetings on the website. You make a public information request and I will get you the Zoom recording.
Oh, sorry, I was in the city council, my bad. The minutes.
The minutes are online, yes.
Okay, there's no reason to deny the request, right?
Oh, no. Oh, granted.
But the information that they presented was in the packets that, which you may have.
Yeah, under the board, when you go look at the board agendas and minutes, if you see a packet, click on that and it'll have the data as well.
Mr. Chair, I need some clarification. I think it was the last meeting of the previous meeting. We had put a framework of how to review information to make a decision.
A framework to mean that I gave you all.
Yeah.
Yes.
To the board.
Yes.
And I'm trying to refresh myself with what that was and then of all the information we had going into that process. How much of what I've heard can be blended into, the kind of the overview that you've given of things that we can consider making a decision.
Okay, well, I'll relate it to Attorney Campanelli. That's what's wrong. All right. So for the record, I provided the board, and I guess you could all look at it, but it's an outline of how I think we need to look at this in the context of the federal law being part of this process. So to help us all be on the same page, including cases that were cited by the lawyers. I believe that it's my experience that Attorney Campanelli is giving us the correct tests that we need to look at in order to figure out what to do. I assume Attorney Rosen will agree with that to some degree. Maybe there are things that he might not agree with specifically, but I think what Attorney Campanelli is saying to us is like as if we were a jury, which we are, I guess, that that if you take the tests as they're presented in the cases, as I showed you, right, the gaps and we can't prohibit cellular service, that he believes that they haven't given us enough information, and he's trying to explain to us what that gap in information is. I'm not going to comment on what weight I would give to what he says, but from the limited experience that I've had, I believe that what he's telling us is the correct law. And he's just saying, if you look at the law the way I think you should look at the law, you'll come out with an answer that says X. Attorney Rosen is saying, if you look at the law the way I think you should look at the law, take my facts and blend them with the law, which is what we're going to do when we deliberate, then you should vote for the permit. The reason I sent you those things is not that you have to understand them in a minute. It's that if you read this stuff and then the conversation keeps repeating itself, you're going to begin, a light will go off for each of the concepts. Maybe the concept in the abstract doesn't make any sense when you first read it. But maybe at a meeting, somebody asks a question, or Attorney Campanelli makes a point, or Attorney Rosen makes a point, or any other people, and you say, aha, now I know how to connect that with the standard, because that's what I'm trying to train us to do. So by the time we get to deliberate, and I don't want to deliberate now, and I don't even have any conversation about deliberation. When we start to deliberate, we're going to ask these questions of ourselves. And we're going to go around the table. We're going to say, so do you think, and if you do, why? And do you think I don't, why? And we're all going to have to substantiate to each other
the evidence as it's been presented to us. Now that we're in this conversation, I'm hoping that by Tuesday, not Tuesday, the next meeting, I think it's the next meeting in May, the first meeting in May, that part of the meeting will be the rebuttal. And then part of the meeting will begin that conversation so that we could tell ourselves whether we are satisfied that we have enough information to go forward with this decision. If we don't, then I'd like people to bring that up at that meeting, and then we can start asking people to provide more information.
Let me ask another question.
Sure.
You have a registered professional design cell covers. They put their credentials on that design.
They did.
We hired a peer review registered professional engineer who certified that what they're proposing to do is sufficient. What ability do we have? Challenge professors who put their license in a position saying this is adequate protection.
That's a really good question. I think we have to peel back the onion.
How do you peel back the onion with someone who is professional? It's certified that the calculations they've done. They really stand.
Hold it, sir. Thank you.
Well, if somebody reviewed something, they look at all the data and they feel what has been proposed to their standard is sufficient. Because if I want to make a decision, I have to understand how I can differ with that unless you hire another peer.
Well, we did not hire a peer review to form an opinion about how they arrived at their gap coverage.
No, I'm just talking about.
Okay, so let's, well,
I'm talking about.
well, the structure, the structure has been reviewed by a peer review, and I guess if you wish to give great weight to that evidence, you can, because you have an expert that is telling you that the tower is safe to begin with, and the tower will be safe with the soft part in the center to the collapse part. And so I'm providing great weight with that. But four people have to. But that's how it works.
Yeah, but I mean, if that is documented information, I would determine the attorney's gonna challenge it. But I'm just saying, for me, we went out and hired that expertise.
Yeah, I think in the end, if this helps you, Peter, I think in the end, when we go through our deliberations and we talk everything through, we'll have to decide how much weight we're going to give that particular component as part of our decision, whether it's to the positive or negative. That's something, I mean, we need more time to discuss in here, because I'd like to go back through and just see when they did the peer review. To me, it was a math check. It wasn't I agree that this is safe. It was their math is good. That's how I took the peer review to be. So that's something we'll have to discuss and decide as a board how much weight we're going to give that.
So to add to that, I think we have to decide on what basis was that opinion derived.
I bring this up as one of many.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I've got a whole sheet of questions.
All right, can we hold a little bit? That's a great question. If there are other questions that are helpful, you're okay?
No, I have a question for attorney.
Please. I'm going to let board members ask questions before folks in the audience. Thank you.
Okay, my question is this, you said that AT&T would have to provide us with drop call data and drive test data to determine signal strength in order to prove that there is a gap. I believe that was paraphrasing what you said. If that's correct, then what is the significance of what we were told by Attorney Rosen last week, which was that AT&T refuses to provide that data? And is that refusal alone cause for dismissing the idea that there is a gap?
Well, what I can tell you is, again, under federal law, it remains within your jurisdiction to require of an applicant whatever evidence you deem reasonably necessary to enable you to make the factual determinations you need to make. And you also get to weigh the evidence, and you get to weigh the veracity of anybody who testifies. And so if you believe, and you've got the map from the FCC, which shows there is no gap. So one might say that it's reasonable that you require them to produce probative data. And I will tell you that I've had, I would say within the past 18 months, at least 3 cases where the applicant was requested to provide drop call data, and they provided it because it was necessary for the board to ascertain if in fact they have a capacity deficiency. So if they don't want to give it to you, you can, what would you do if this was just some other type of zoning application? Forget that it's a cell tower. Treat it like any other zoning application. And suppose you asked an applicant to provide you with certain types of evidence and they refuse to do it. How would that work under Massachusetts law? Bear in mind, I'm not admitted to practice in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I have been admitted to the Federal Court of Massachusetts, and I'm admitted to the Circuit Court. But under the standard under Massachusetts law, are you allowed to ask them for evidence? And if they refuse to provide it, what is within your powers to do? Can you deny based upon that? That's governed purely by state law, not federal law.
Thank you. We understand. It's again, it goes to bringing our perspective to what we're listening to. Okay, I'm gonna go back to people. Somebody behind me want to have a question? Oh, you had the original question. Remember? That's right. You haven't spoken yet, have you?
Yeah, let her talk. She's been waiting forever.
Name and address, please. Great.
There was one other person who spoke. I think my question is for both you and the attorney. There was one other person who spoke here who said if the tower goes up, people move, and it has young children. I also have young children. I'm not as close to the cell tower as that person, but close enough that I don't like it. And if the cell tower does go up, I will also look to move. And so Solar Way is largely most 89% income-based housing. That would be a big financial hardship for my family to move. But because I have little children, I'm not willing to be exposed to that type of radiation on a regular basis. What? Like, does that, if enough people are saying, if you put this up, I'm moving. What, like, does that impact this at all?
I'll let Attorney Campanelli speak first. Did you hear the question?
I'm sorry, yes. What is the impact of people saying they're going to move?
No, I think your question is because people will, if a large enough number of people decide they are going to move because of the fears associated with health risks, let's use that as an example.
Or for whatever reason.
Oh, let's just use that of the cell tower. Well, it's for reasons, for whatever reason. Okay. Is that evidence for the board to use in making its decision?
No. 3 things you cannot use. You cannot use people saying they're going to move if the tower goes up. You cannot, unfortunately, use concerns over the environmental impacts, i.e. the health concerns. And third, if someone, if 1,000 people sign a petition and send a petition to you, that also is not a valid legal grounds to deny the application. The valid grounds for denying it are set forth in your code. They're black and white. They're very simple.
I thank you for that support. Thank you.
Well, it was a clear answer.
It was a very clear answer.
Best guess.
I will promise, but if somebody else who hasn't spoken yet.
There is one financial thing that will affect the town, because what happened in Pittsfield is those people can't give away their houses.
and they had to declare bankruptcy. These are working class people, slaughtered. And that will happen up there if enough people move out of there and nobody wants to buy it. And then you've got your little mini Chernobyl, happy day. People's not getting their taxes. So this will affect the town, one way or another.
But that doesn't change, it's not what the board can look at.
It's not.
Well, don't try to.
The financial impact does affect
Don't-
the decision.
Please, don't try to second guess what we're gonna do. I mean, you can speak.
To speak, especially those that are out in the hallway. Yeah.
All right, I'm sorry, did I fail to get your name and address?
My name is Diana Gapkins. I own a business in Greenfield at 6 Silvio County Drive.
Thank you.
One behind you.
Go ahead.
I have a question.
Name and address.
Jonathan Marin, 224 Avery Brook Road, Charlemont. Thank you. I have a question for Attorney Campanelli. You still there?
Yes.
My question is, it seems like if you just give a little broad overview of all the cases you're working on nationally, and it seems like generally, the carriers are not immediately forthcoming with drop call data, and, you know, they have to be requested repeatedly, and sometimes they say yes, sometimes they say no. Can you give us just a quick sense of if that information, which is obviously what Dr. Chamberlain described as the gold standard, if that was routinely given as a matter of course, could you give us just a little sense of how that might impact their business plan overall?
Well, what I'm seeing across the United States with the alleged 5G rollout is in the vast majority of applications, the towers that are being applied for are not necessary for voice coverage. It's not 5G or 4G or 3G. It's broadband, it's wireless internet. That's what the vast majority of applications are for. And yet the applicants come in and say, we need this for 5G and 4G. And because they have 4G and 5G coverage, they can't provide the data because the data will show that there are no gaps. And as far as providing it, the federal court last month just made it crystal clear in Monmouth County, New Jersey, United States District Court in the District of New Jersey. The applicant wouldn't provide the drop call data and they filed a lawsuit, and the federal judge said, if you claim you've got a capacity deficiency, you have to give them the drop call data. So I've got a federal judge saying that, and that's from 2024.
I want to follow that's a good question. I want to expand it. Let's say they gave us the drop call data. What do you expect we would find, number one? And what's wrong with the data that they've given us?
They haven't given you probative data. I could prepare a map showing you the locations of all chunky cheeses located on the Gaza Strip in Israel. It would be completely untethered from reality, but I could give it to you. The maps they provided you have no data backing them up. Consider yourself a jury, a judge. You want the applicant to provide evidence. The maps that they've given you would not be admitted as evidence in any federal or state court of anything. Nobody's verified these maps. They don't claim they're based upon actual data. They are desktop created maps. Somebody sat at a computer desktop and used software, perhaps Atoll, and just created a color map. Without data, without the data that it was created from, it's the functional equivalent of giving your grandchild 3 colored crayons, let it curl on a piece of paper and say, here's the coverage map. And I don't mean to sound facetious, but if anybody ever tried that to get in court with that in front of a judge, it'd never be admitted.
Thank you.
Questions behind you.
So we have some members here that have some obligations.
Sure.
So
So they come, why don't you decide?
I don't know, I know this woman does, Kate, and I know that other people did, but it's soon we need to say. This will be my. For comment, not question, so I didn't know when you were gonna.
If there's a time factor, you can speak on a comment or you can ask a question.
People comment.
Name and address, please.
Kate Broughton, 9th Meridian Street,
Mhm.
miles. And first of all, I'm a technology, I do technology. And I love it, and so for me, wanting to be able, as you mentioned, this is to me not about, do we need service? Do we need more? We're always gonna be expensive, like the genie's out of the bottle, and it's gonna become a never-ending voracious beast, yeah, right? So, but we're not really here to talk about
is there enough? It's a specific proposal at a specific location that we're talking about. And I mentioned that by Zoom, at our last meeting in terms of funding and the issue of scale and territory, but right now I just want to say something about the variance. So far, especially after watching these presentations tonight, I just don't get a sense that Verizon Wireless has met the three specific criteria for variance. The first one being substantial hardship. I don't believe that they've proven that it would impose serious hardship upon them. If they were to adhere to some regulations. And since they don't own the property, should they not be able to build this tower as they proposed, they wouldn't suffer any loss. Because they entered into this conversation, they insist fully knowing that they might not receive the variance, especially this permit. They chose a site that would not accommodate them, right? That's their choice, but they chose a site that knowing they could not accommodate with that 178 parameter. And that's this risk that they consciously decided to take. But risks like this are things that they do by nature. They kind of just searching for a possibility. They do a litmus test to see. And then if it doesn't work, they want, it's not going to be any suffering on their part. So to me, I thought they have no true investment here, and their application lies variance. They can go find another location. Even if they're one nearby, that would still help. Number two, I have to include conditions. Site chosen for cell tower is not unique in any way to prohibit the building of it. It's not the land or the topography. It's the problem, but rather their proposal to build a tower so much higher that is allowed for this property. So any points made about the conditions of the property are moot points, and therefore it's qualified. And number three, regarding no detriment to the public good. This third criteria states that granting of variance should not harm public values or violate the intent of zoning regulations. And so in addition to this comments that we heard tonight, we fully quantified the existence of public harms. There have also been numerous submissions of evidence from residents showing identified harms such as fire hazards, fall zone, property evaluations, cybersecurity, and health. That's something to consider. Should be disqualified with the variance. So based on those things, not motion, not to really want it, based on what you know, my feeling is that these are the criteria not to be met.
Please apply for the zoning board.
I'm not the first.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. My neck hurts. Yes, ma'am. Again, name and address again.
Dan Fleury, 97 Newton Street, Greenfield.
Yes.
Just in walking when the balloon went up the other day, take a look. I just feel the need to mention also in regards to the aesthetic. There are far fewer trees between my house and the location of that than there are some of the other residents around, particularly on Newton Street. Due to the fact that the storage facility is there, and a lot of that was cleared out of trees for them to be able to build. So it's far more obvious from my perspective than a lot of others.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Mine's actually,
Again, name again, just a name.
sorry, Julie Page.
That's fine.
Hi, Meyer. The attorney said that petitions and signatures and things don't matter. But then earlier this evening, it was said that individual affidavits showing you do, from cell phone users showing they do have coverage and they are not dropping calls in the areas in the maps proposed, that those do matter. So I'm a little lost on the petition versus affidavit.
Well, I don't,
And I'm also like looking for people who are concerned, if we know that defeating the tower is gonna be based on proving usage exists and the tower's not needed? Can people turn in something that says, hey, I got good cell phone coverage here? Would that be of any value? Sorry, that's fair, I mean, maybe the attorney.
I can answer it, but I need to collect my thoughts. Do you have a quick answer?
Sure. So there's a distinction between a petition and the other things you mentioned.
An
If someone
affidavit.
just gets 2,000 signatures on a petition that says, we don't want the tower, that cannot be used as a basis to turn it down. That's not a legitimate objection to the tower. By contrast, if you say, it's gonna have a dramatic adverse impact on my house because if it gets built, every time I look out my bedroom window, this is gonna be dead set in the middle of my view, that is substantial evidence of an adverse aesthetic impact. That counts. Now, as far as phone calls and say, I don't have drop calls, I will tell you that in most cases, if people say, I've lived here 20 years, I use Verizon, I don't have any drop calls, the wireless industry argues that that constitutes what's called anecdotal evidence. It's not enough of a statistical sample to be deemed reliable evidence. And so that's why the burden should be placed on the applicant to provide the evidence, because they have it at their hands. It's easy to provide the evidence that the board needs to enable it to make a decision. That's where the evidence should come from.
Okay, I want to add to that. I don't mean this personally. Right now, unless somebody tells me otherwise, I'm not accepting affidavits from people that tell me that they have drop calls or not. All that says is, I swear that something happened, but it's not evidence of any more than that. Just like, he's much better at the analogies, but I will not accept that. I'm not gonna have 1,000 people walk in and tell me that they do or don't get it. Yes.
I'm Elizabeth Neff, 191.
However, if you tell me anecdotally what you've experienced, I'm glad to hear it. But it's not evidence.
Yeah, I have 1 minute. I'm Elizabeth Neff, 191 Fairview Street.
Yes, thank you.
West. Many of my neighbors are here. I'd like to read this. Iridium Wireless is asking for a variance that exempts them from having to comply with fog zone requirement. The height of the cell tower they are proposing, 170 feet or 14 stories. That may be a little inaccurate. 170 feet, 14 stories.
Well, it's 170 feet. Let's stick with that.
Yeah, stick with that. This is not acceptable to the residents. It puts residents and the public against severe and very unnecessary risk. The various stages surrounding cell towers and inadequate fall zones include, but are not limited to, cell tower collapses, cell tower fires, and falling cell tower debris. During the last public hearing on April 9th, our ZBA chair, David Singer, shared that he had spoken to an engineer that would not tell him that the hinge design that the applicant has proposed for the cell tower was as safe as a fall zone safety and protection. The engineer told him that an adequate fall zone was the only truly assured protective measure with regards to a guarantee of safety for the residents. Need I say more? Thank you, and I ask that you deny this request for variance.
What I meant to say what I'm being quoted as saying, the meaning of my quote was that, yes, the engineer said that he could not say that the break was as safe as the fall zone. He didn't say that the break wasn't safe. He just said it wasn't as safe as the fall zone. That's a true statement. But other than that, we have to give it weight, credibility. So don't get all excited. Yeah, yes,
I have a question for you.
please. Say your name again, just so when he takes the notes.
Kate Giordano.
Thank you. Yep.
I have a question in that, the cell phone company, whatever, Telecom, whoever the heck it is, AT&T.
It's AT&T.
AT&T. Are they motivated by money? They want to make money. Everyone in this room is motivated by safety and health and security of our families and our home values, good things. Motivation of money is, and, you know, expanding business is a totally different thing. What if suddenly, like, they were like, oh, you know what, we have, we'll come up with that information about all these drop calls. Is there a way for them to fake such a document? And how would we know, how would you know that the document is falsified? Do they need to provide proof of where it comes from? Because I honestly don't really trust a company like that to not try to do something like that. Because they're motivated.
You know, I understand what you're saying. I can't say that in my life I haven't, or that I still don't have concerns about the things you're expressing, but when applicants come forward and they do it in good faith, which I believe this application is totally being made in good faith. And good faith just means they believe that what they're doing is important for them in relationship to the laws that govern how they can proceed with this type of infrastructure. I actually asked your question again.
Is the attorney still there? Is he not?
Well, I just want to answer, but I went off on my little dreamy vote.
Is it a question for him?
It's a question for him? Go for it.
Is he? Did you?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Have you ever seen companies try to falsify documents?
Oh, that's right.
To say that they do have dropped calls? And how would the board know that a document is falsified?
Well, two different questions. First question, I would say that in the applications that I see, I would say in 90% of the cases, applicants file either false or materially misleading documents in support of their applications. I cannot say I've ever seen falsified drop call records. I think they kind of be hard to falsify. So I would trust drop call records more than a coverage map with no data backing it up.
I don't want to end, I'm not ending on this note. I'm not ending on this note. You have the right to your opinion and I appreciate it. And you're the experienced guy but you go all over the country and you deal with the rest of the United States. That's not what happens here. So we don't.
People never lie to people.
It's not about lying. You can tell when it's up to us to go through the evidence and figure out whether we find it credible or not. If we think it's not credible, then we'll make a decision that it's not. I don't want to have,
If you could clarify how you would know it was not, that's what I was asking. Just because I want you to have the right information or be able to tell if something's fake.
You don't think that this board could tell whether they're being given information that
I don't know,
people
I
are
don't know your
lying to us?
backgrounds, I have no idea who you are.
Okay. Well, I assure you that we can. And if Attorney Campanelli has some tips for the board about how to make those decisions, I'd be happy to hear them. But I feel like this conversation has kind of gone off the rails.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm really not meaning this in an offensive way, I'm meaning it as a.
You may not mean it in an offensive way, and I'm not trying to say you're being offensive. I am not going to have a conversation where we're standing around saying the applicant is lying.
I'm not.
But you are.
No, I'm not.
No,
If
she's
I
not.
said,
She's not.
if someone were to do that, how
It's a
would you
basic
know?
conflict of interest.
Can I
Can I say one
It's a
thing?
basic
Yes.
tenet.
I think I didn't know, like, for example, the propagation maps, when I saw them, I was like, oh, wow, oh, there's a coverage gap. Oh, when I was in the first meeting, I was like, oh gosh, there's a coverage gap. Who knew? And then we learned those maps are not based on actual data. Now, I would like to ask the ZBA, did you know that? Did you know that that is misleading? Did you know that there are other more accurate? Did you know that it was in conflict with what is on the FCC and on the AT&T side? Yes.
I would actually, we have questioned those maps since day one, and that's all I have to say.
Okay, but I didn't know that. As coming to all these meetings, I thought that this was new and like, I took it as, oh, wow, there's the gap. So for me, it's been a learning experience. I hope it has been for the ZBA, as this is an application you haven't seen before. We haven't had an application for a cell tower in this town for over 20 years.
I will say something else. What we've been doing here is giving the applicant their opportunity to speak
Yeah.
and present all their evidence. We've then opened it up to the public to speak and present all of their evidence. In count, the board has yet to have those conversations amongst themselves. Those have to be public. And so if you guys just can get through this, wrap it up, if we have anything to say, let's make it new and relevant and move on so we can get to the point where we can deliberate and then you can hear what we want to know, what we want to think. We spent a lot of time hearing everybody else. The board has yet to have their opportunity.
I'd like to make we made a very diligent effort over several meetings. Listen to all kinds of input. We've digested it as best we could. We've been asked that questions in multiple ways. We're trying to focus on what are the real issues. So, you know, to start coming at us. You know, wait, please, you know, we've made an exceptional effort to try to digest all the information. We're going to use that very precisely to come up with a solution, but it's not going to be an easy process. So, you know.
Yeah, with all due respect, my comment wasn't intended to say that the ZBA is not doing that. My comment was to say that information has been presented and then we've had Kent and Andrew say, well, this information that was presented by the applicant is actually misinformation, is not representing a true actual fact. So for me, like.
But that's their opinion. And so we're gonna decide whether we believe their opinions to be credible, and then we'll weigh all that everybody has said. And
Is it
that's.
opinion or fact? I feel like.
Attorney
this is-
Campanelli has provided, you guys have provided, you haven't provided, the fact that there's an FCC map and then it's different from the other map, yeah, that's a fact, and we'll put weight to it.
Okay, that's
But
all I'm saying.
but because they did that, because the applicant did that, I think Attorney Campanelli has been excellent in telling us, in explaining to us, especially from your point of view, what weight we should give the evidence of the maps that were given to us. He's saying, give it low weight. So we're listening. And we're gonna listen to what everybody says, and we're gonna put it all together in a reasonable fashion, in a thoughtful fashion. If we were to ask AT&T for their data, I would assume, like every other applicant that comes before us, by the way, that what that we've asked for it, and they're giving us what we've asked for. That's how it works. That's how you work. That's how it works. If you came in for a permit, if anybody, this is not, we don't take testimony, we don't put people under oath. You all have done an excellent job of bringing our attention to things that are outside of what they brought our attention to. And so that's been very useful, but I don't think it's fair, even if you didn't mean it, to have this discussion about whether or not they're going to lie to us. It's not a conversation, it's a speculative conversation. I know you want to speak.
I just wanna, maybe Attorney Campanelli saying that I didn't say though factually, I don't think it was a matter of opinion, that the broadband map they provided actually is not giving you any data whatsoever on 5G.
That's his opinion.
No, I think that's fact.
It's not fact, it's his opinion. I have no idea it's fact. I have no idea.
Broadband and 5G are different things.
All right.
That's what he said.
Okay, so
Is that not
if
correct?
you want to believe that,
I
then
don't
that's
think it's-
fine.
I just think it's important to say that it's not a matter
Then
of.
say, I'll tell you what, if you want to make a statement that you think that his evidence should be considered by us with great weight, I would welcome that.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, there you go.
Okay, thank you very much.
I mean, I think that it's very.
Okay, thank you very much.
It's like
I-
saying that ham is, you know, it's not the same thing.
Okay, and I honor and respect what you say, and it may have great weight if you have no weight, but I appreciate you saying it. That's the reason you're all here, is to give us evidence. But I have to draw the line.
David, I'm just curious. If we turned this down and voted to put it in the fairgrounds, how many people here at this meeting would object to the fairgrounds?
I'm
just curious.
Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Just so you know, there are some hands raised from the internet world. Stephanie Duclos has her hand up for quite a while.
All right, Attorney Campanelli, you done? I mean, you don't have to leave the meeting, but can I take you off the full screen?
Yes, you can. Thank you. And
Thank you for
your time.
everything. Thank you.
Thank you.
Because I know how to see the view thing then.
Okay,
There we go. Still got a hand up.
Yes, I'm sorry. I didn't know if I was being recognized. It took us a moment. Thank you for your patience. Thank you. My name is Stephanie Duclos. I live on Chapman Street in Greenfield. I want to reiterate the email I sent is a bona fide offer for remedy. I don't know if that's been forwarded to another attorney, but that's something that I believe that fell under the second consideration for the variance. Also, as a longtime cell phone user for various companies, I know that in the past, when I had dropped calls significant enough to impact important, emergency issues, that the companies then credited my bill with either a discount or a promotion or something. But that may be able to reiterate, a potential call log discrepancy that, how much is your real financial loss? I mean, if you're, it's just an inconvenience for your customers. I just traveled all the way up to New Hampshire and back, and, there was a dead spot in Northfield, but it doesn't mean that I want to, have another cell tower in Northfield and degrade the aesthetics of that. Also, that there is other options to the customers themselves. They can go out and get a booster, given the location of my home and topography, as well as the insulation of my home. It does impact what my ability to make some calls at times, but the company offered me a booster so that I wouldn't continue to call and say, hey, my service has been interrupted. And I did have a question because I have been watching the FCC teams that are working on the new technology of 6G. So not quite sure how that impacts maybe what they're putting up, but I'd be concerned with not having the evidence if that's going to be a 6G tower. And if the people really wanted to, I mean, Chevron deference was overturned. So if you want to challenge the FCC, go right ahead. I think you guys have a lot of evidence that would support, especially given the testimony from I think his name was Kent in the very beginning. And I hope that his documents or his slide presentation is entered into the record, regardless of whether or not you put weight to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else that wants to talk on the internet? Anybody else here want to talk?
David, pardon me for interrupting, but he's been trying to talk for a little while.
Oh, he has. Well, I haven't seen his.
Yeah, I know.
You didn't
You're
see, I've been
behind.
raising my hand.
I don't see the same ones. Thank you.
It's a question for you, Dave.
Yes.
Did we formally request data from AT&T to provide drop call data, to provide drive test data, and to provide maps showing signal strength at lower levels? Because I believe those are three factors that have been stressed by Attorney Campanelli in making, if we should decide that they have not proven that there's a gap in coverage. And if we haven't,
It hasn't come.
formally.
It hasn't come from the chair.
I know that it has come, it was informally discussed, but the response that we got was, no, we're not going to give you that information.
You did formally ask last meeting. And we were denied, and he said it was proprietary data and they would not.
Oh, I did ask, yes, I did ask that question. I did.
That was formally requested.
It's a theoretical, it's an if I asked, you used the word if.
Yeah, I thought you did say, if I asked that, I think we should formally request it.
Yeah, but thank you.
Yes.
Okay, hold that in abeyance for a second.
Okay.
Well. Question.
You mentioned the bottle or something, you made it really often.
So the applicant has the right to say what they want to say, because it's their application, so they get to have the final word. Know that folks here would like to have the final word. Also, I don't know if I'm going to give you all the final word, but if I do have questions, I'm happy to go back to folks and have you clarify things for us. I'm not leaving you out, but it's the applicant's application.
You've given us a lot of information and it's important information, but it's their application, so it's a, I see what you mean. So, the next steps are that at the next meeting, Attorney Rosen and others will probably rebut what was said tonight in some way, shape, or form. I have asked, I have made a request that the engineer come and talk about how they gathered the data for the mapping. And they're going to be there on the next meeting to talk about that and answer questions about that. So we didn't make a specific request as Member Greens had said, but we're prepared to, we expect that AT&T will come to the next meeting prepared to answer the background of how they obtain the data. So we from the last meeting and a meeting further back, and Attorney Campanelli brought out the point about drop call information. We've been very aware of the importance of that information in the context of discussing this. Yes.
Just hoping, I need to leave soon to get home. I just wanted to have a statement I'd like to read. Before I leave. So good evening. Here representing myself. 22 other butters and nearby residents of the proposed tower. We request that you deny the variance for the tower as the applicant has not meaningfully proven or quantified any aspects of their assertions. The applicant has been asked repeatedly to explain the methodology they used to evaluate the other sites, the specific process they used, and not just state the takeaways like it's too close to the AM radio station. They need to provide their detailed reports on each of the other sites they present. Again, details, testing, reports, and results, not just the overview they gave. The ZBA has every right to see these reports and data, and frankly, the applicant has likely not done it. The fact that the Hampton Inn was presented as hypothetical, but they did not consider it a truly viable location, sounds like they likely did not choose other sites that would be viable and did not do their due diligence in evaluating them. They also failed to identify last week any other sites that were chosen on a hypothetical basis. The criteria for the variance is not that they choose a dozen sites they know will not work to present to the ZBA, but that they identify other valid locations. It does not appear that they have done that, and we don't currently have evidence for that. Also, Veridian Wireless has claimed a gap in coverage for one singular carrier, AT&T. They have not, as we talked about tonight, quantified this gap in terms of its size, the number of customers affected by this potential gap, the ways this gap was measured, calibrated, or proof that a tower in this location would cover the alleged gap. The Telecommunications Act allows for some dead zones, but small gaps or dead zones aren't enough to warrant a new cell tower. It is a significant and true gap in coverage that would be demonstrated to necessitate the construction of a tower, which to date has not been meaningfully demonstrated. On December 2nd, 2024, I requested copies of information provided by the applicant to Greenfield to substantiate any gap in coverage, including dropped call logs and dropped emergency call logs in the area. I recall that David, you approved that this request be sent to the applicant. I have an email thread with that. We don't have the date of that
I
request.
brought your email, just so you know.
Okay, thank you. I raised this issue again at last week's hearing when the applicant noted to the ZBA that they would not provide this information because they considered it proprietary. I will note that other carriers, as Attorney Campanelli has stated tonight, do provide drop call logs and data to demonstrate a significant gap in coverage. And there is established legal precedence to that fact. Tonight, we are submitting documentation of a legal case regarding the release of drop call logs, and Verizon submitted drop call logs and data that was provided in Ithaca, New York to the municipality for an application approval hearing. The drop call logs information is necessary to determine and validate a true gap of service. The ZBA has a well-established right to ask for these records and data as a requirement of various applications and approvals, especially for towers or residential and school areas. If the applicant is unwilling to provide information to quantify their position, which should make them ineligible for the variance they have requested. As you can see, there is a pattern of the applicant not providing quantifying information to support their assertions and claims. To meet the criteria for the variance, these claims must be fully supported and demonstrated by fact. We have not been provided with the information necessary to prove the assertions that have been made or to meaningfully make the assessment need. For these reasons and more, we urge you on behalf of the neighborhood and community to not grant this variance and to find another more appropriate place.
Is that the end? Oh, go ahead.
Okay, it's Tom Power, I live at 41 Solar Way. Quick comment. I mean, first of all, I thank you for all the work you do. I mean, not on the board, zoning board, but on the board of trustees in my neighborhood. I know that it's like a lot of to make these decisions. But I wanted to talk about, like we were talking about before, like how are you going to evaluate data and evidence, things like that. And I'm not attempting to impugn the good name of the applicant, but I think you absolutely can put in, like, as you're waiting lists, like they have an interest in putting that up. And
I think that's a fair comment.
And like the lawyer who's hired, but the people who are from, like, we're gonna live next to it, really don't. Their interest is preserving in their interest, their health and their sex, and those things. So as you're weighting the evidence, I would really urge you to weight it in appropriately. And I think that the information that gentleman just requested must be asked for and received before you prove whatever you have to prove, in my opinion.
Thank you. Thank you for the way that you expressed that.
And lastly, no, this isn't good, but like, look, people want 5G. That's important to them. They can put a cell tower like that above their house. But I think it's really unfortunate that like people living there don't have control of that. And maybe they don't want 5G. And why are the rest of us as a community instead forcing these people to have to live under cell phone tower?
It is a conundrum.
Well, it's a conundrum, but it's also something like, I know you have to use criteria in federal law, but there's always going to be interpretation. And you have that political power to make that interpretation.
I can assure you that every member of this board will listen. Anything else?
I'd like to make a statement, it might be redundant at this point.
Again, mention your name again.
Terry Cash,
Thank you, Terry.
17 Norwood Street.
Thank you.
I wanted to add some clarity to some comments that were made last week at the April 9th hearing regarding Greenfield's overall cellular coverage needs. First, as has been discussed on a number of occasions, the purpose of these hearings is to decide whether the applicant of this project meets the requirements for the requested variance, special use permit. Do not do a comprehensive analysis of Greenfield's bigger picture cellular coverage and capacity needs. Public has been asked to stay within this variance scope, and we hope that these proceedings will also stay within this dedicated scope, and it seems like you are. We are talking about one cell tower that is not allowed to be built by right in this location. The tower needs a variance and special use permit from the city in order to be built near a residential area, close to a school with an inadequate fall zone, much smaller than the one necessary to protect residents in our community. We cannot conflate the proposed cell tower as the solution for the extra needed coverage for Greenfield community. Greenfield cell coverage is not reliant on any one tower or this cell tower. There are issues of coverage around the city. This needs to be addressed separately. The city of Greenfield will need to do a deep dive into testing, mitigating, creating a strategic master plan to address any further coverage and capacity needs the city might have. Conversation last week was centered a good deal around Greenfield's overall cellular coverage needs, which doesn't apply to this variance request. Where a higher 14-story cell tower be built in a residential area, school in our community. I joined many of the residents both here and on Zoom this evening in asking for your denial of the variance of this cell tower for an alternative placement. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alana. Not a rebuttal. Okay, go ahead. For the record, this is Attorney Burns.
Representing already brought up, and then I wanted to interrupt. So. As we talked about at the last meeting, it is about taking facts, painting a picture, and those facts and the picture people paint are gonna be described by various people's opinions. I think at the end of the day, the board does not have an enviable job and filtering through everything and trying to figure out, distinguish between fact and opinion. What's been presented, what hasn't been presented. I'll give 3 examples. Last week, there was a discussion about how we were asked to provide structural data with respect to the tower. We were told we never provided it, which in fact was incorrect. We actually have provided it, and the board actually confirmed. But the others were raising the issue that we were denying. Number 1 example. Number 2, tonight, what Mr. Chamberlain presented. He represented to this board that he would show you AT&T's map, and he had it circled. It was claiming that that was our map when we presented it. I don't even know what's on that map. It's not our map. We didn't present that map. We never have. I want to thank Attorney Campanelli because he's the 3rd example. At one point tonight, he said that we were trying to put in a 32-foot foundation and that would support a 199-foot tower. However, later in the discussion, he said, let me verify that. And he actually went to his records to determine whether or not he had accurately read that or not, because there was some confusion. While all of you were facing the audience and having the discussion, Attorney Campanelli, I want to thank you. He did a chat on the screen to acknowledge that in fact that wasn't correct. But it's about having the right information. So here's my recommendation. Mr. Chair, you raised a question at the last meeting. You commented that when you hired TEP, you thought they were covering everything. You didn't realize they weren't covering everything. What we'd like to do is we would like to set aside an escrow, like to provide you with a $5,000 escrow. We'd like you to hire an RF engineer, somebody who's capable and competent to provide this forward. They are independent third-party opinion. I think that somebody was talking about earlier. Let's get independent opinions from other people. I believe Mr. Wozniak mentioned that. Let's get an RF engineer who can help you kind of weed through fact versus opinion. He can tell you what is customary in this industry. He can tell you whether or not the materials, because, quite frankly, and Mr. Chair, I thank you. We were being accused of lying. And with all due respect, I've been doing this for a long time. I've done several hundred hearings. No one's ever accused me of lying. I've had plenty of people tell me they don't want the hearings in their backyard. So
I think I was trying to point out that even when you're not accusing somebody of lying directly, because maybe that wasn't her intention, by saying what she said, it's no different than if she was sitting there and she was about to begin an application for a special permit and somebody in the audience said, how can we believe anything she said? We shut it down. It's not gonna happen again. We don't need to, please, let's leave it.
But I want to fix the problem.
Yeah.
So what I'd like the board to do is if they could vote on engaging an RF engineer to review the project. I would ask that we work with Eric for you to identify who that peer would be. Qualified, no conflicts, just like TEP. We will expedite all of the information that we have to get it over to them with a goal that they can have a report back to you by May 8th and possibly even appear at the hearing on the evening of May 8th. Because we are so confident that they will confirm to you that what we've done is consistent with industry standard, it's consistent with Massachusetts law, it's consistent with federal courts in Massachusetts require of applicants for cell towers, and it will help you sort through the various paintings of the information that have been presented to you by opponents, proponents, applicants, abutters, and the community to help you sort through what you're gonna need to do on future meetings when you deliberate on the application. So that would be my offer to this board. And we're happy to cooperate with that, to the extent that that's something the board would be interested in. And I think that's an easy way for the board to know that you're getting information that's reliable and having it peer reviewed by independent people.
What I suggest is to develop scope of services that's mutually agreed upon by AT&T and the community's expert. So when those findings come out, there's not a debate back and forth as to what that means. Sound reasonable?
It does, Mr. Ross, yeah, thank you.
Why does it matter if you hire an RF expert if you're not even trying to use radio frequency health concerns as a point of conflict? What's the point?
Well, the point is that I think on the top of your mind is the health effects, which I totally understand. But in terms of the legal system, which is it's called like a game of chess. What Attorney Rosen is saying is that it's been suggested by Attorney Campanelli that what they provided us is meaningless. And we have no way of knowing because we're not engineers. So they're suggesting that they pay for us to choose somebody totally independent from them, so they wouldn't control that choice. And that person would come in and help. We haven't even said anything about it, but I'm just phrasing what he said. And that expert would come in and be our expert, the board's expert. And we would say, well, we have this question, that question, this question, that question, this question, that question, this question, and the expert would be able to answer those questions from the position of someone who's very familiar with how this information gets gathered and then presented to boards like us. So theoretically, that person might disagree with Attorney Campanelli and say that the maps that they sent us do have validity for the following reasons. Or what Attorney Rosen is challenging is that, and maybe it won't work out, the engineer says their maps are all wet, they're meaningless. But we would have an engineer that had no stake in the game except to make sure that we understood what we were doing. So that's
third person impartial.
Third
The
person.
engineer would have the ability to.
That's what he's suggesting. So the expert would be somebody that would help us. And I guess in essence, help you, yeah, sure. I haven't finished the answer. Are you all set with the answer?
Are you done with what you were saying back? Because I'm not trying to interrupt you.
I know, it's okay. But I don't want to give her a chance to.
So with all due respect to Attorney Rosen and the generous offer of an RF engineer, I've been at many cell tower hearings in the area over the last 10 years. And I've never seen an RF engineer who didn't have basically a long history of working with industry in one way or another. So the idea of an impartial RF engineer that you're just going to magically find is hard to imagine for me. And the other thing that, my understanding of the neighbors' concerns is, obviously there's people who are concerned about health. There's no argument. The RF engineer is not going to, can't say anything about health. They're not going to say anything else, except that they're going to say, this tower is within the FCC guidelines, which would be absolutely true. What we need, what the abutters need, and I'm speaking on behalf of the abutters at this point because I've spoken to them, is probative evidence as Attorney Campanelli has called for. In other words, drop call data. So although I appreciate the generosity of Attorney Rosen's offer and, $5,000, but what would actually be an interesting offer is to say, well, Verizon, we have examples of Verizon providing drop call data that we can send you this evening. It's not an industry secret to them, it seems. It's just asking for drop call data. And then, rather than prolonging, because your time's running out. That would be my pitch. Nobody's bringing in sort of a meaningless.
Nobody's time is running out.
Can I just make one clarification?
Sure.
I'm not suggesting that we would engage an RF engineer to dispel any health related aspect. I am suggesting we hire an RF engineer who can analyze the coverage of the fish, not health.
I appreciate what you have to say. We will use, yes.
Would the RF engineer be in place of not getting drop call data?
We haven't decided anything. as the suggestions are made, the board hasn't had a chance to talk about it. So that's a good notion. I guess if I imagine what the RF engineer would do is we could ask the RF engineer. So compared to what they got us, what they sent us is drop call data like 10 times better. I would hope the RF engineer, being our engineer, would say, yes, it is. And then, so that Attorney Rosen seems to be confident that if we ask that question, that's not going to be the answer. But at least I think because he's seeing where things are moving, he wants to give us a chance to feel independently educated and comfortable that that we understand the data as it's being given to us. So that's a good point that you made, but I want you to know the distinction is that the expert is the one that helps us understand whether the methods were used properly or what we really need to have. Drop call data is something that you all have insisted that we get, and you've told us that that's the gold standard, but we don't have any expert that's told us that that's the case. I'm not saying Attorney Campanelli is not an expert, and maybe he's right, but I'm not going to rely on the attorney for the concerned citizens to be my expert because he couldn't do it anyway because he's got a kind of conflict. So it looks like there might be a gap in information. So we're going to now discuss it. So I'm going to give you folks, you can wait, you can listen, you can sit and be here. And by the way, Attorney Rosen will be given the privilege of speaking with us, even if I shut down the public segment of this. So I don't want anybody to feel the hurt feelings. So this is your last chance to say something. If you need to, yes.
Just wanted to note that it was actually the experts from UNH that called the drop call data the gold standard, not the attorney.
Okay, thank you.
Last thing. Well, I would suggest that you could also save $5,000 and just have Ken Chamberlain, who is an expert in this issue, be your expert.
But don't you understand, he's not
right.
You think he's objective, but we no longer think he's objective. So even though he's giving an opinion, and I'm sure he's the best, and there's no reason for me not to appreciate and believe what he's saying. You brought it. So we now need somebody in our camp. So I appreciate that. And thank you for bringing that up. I just knew that somebody said it, and I feel like I need to know from somebody who's like independent of all the back and forth about this. Go ahead.
Yes, just that, but they are the ones living.
Yeah, but you have a zoning code, and there's a federal law that says, especially the federal law that says that these are people that we elected to Congress that voted in a statute that said we want cell towers all over the country. So they come to us and they ask us for this that they ask us to decide yes or no.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, I'm just.
So we didn't initiate this. I just think what you're saying doesn't make sense as the chair of the board. Yes.
Is it as simple as if we had a zoning restriction that nothing to be built taller than 3 stories, that suffice for this to be negated?
But there's a federal law that says that they have proven that they need this above and beyond everything else, then that's considered hardship. So that's a factor for the variance. So that's why we have to pin down the facts and make sure we feel comfortable with the facts so that when we compare it to the law, we know we can make a decision that is what we consider to be the proper decision. And please don't misunderstand me with anything I've said tonight, even if I've shut down some things. We are your community. Okay. This isn't like you didn't go to Boston for this. We're not, and we're your community. Okay, so we're here to do our job, appreciating that we all live in this community, but we have a job to do. So you're just gonna have to trust that we're going to make every effort to do the right thing based on all those variables. And that's all I can say. I know we're committed to it. So and I can't say enough how I appreciate everybody coming out and all the information that you gave us. And now we're going to deliver. All right. Anything else? Good.
Good.
Okay. So I think we should make a motion. Maybe Eric, you want to make a motion? Oh, wait, hold on. First, there's Attorney Rosen's suggestion. Do we want to integrate it with something that we're going to talk about? Something, I mean, how are we going to discuss his offer in the context of Eric's offer? Separate, together? What do we want to do?
Eric's offer.
Well, Eric's proposal is that we ask for certain things. Attorney Rosen's is saying he's going to give us money to hire an engineer, but that engineer will collect all the data that's now available. He has not agreed, nor has AT&T agreed, that that data will include any of this information. It would be the information that's already in the record.
So I guess here's my question that actually came up with the whole notion of having to make a formal request for the data. Is it our job to like excruciatingly pull the evidence of need out of the applicant? Like, or is it the applicant's job to give us the data that they think best makes their case, and then we judge based on that?
The latter.
So why do we have to make formal requests for information? Like, if this is the best information that they can offer to establish need, great. If there's now a sense of we actually think that we could throw some money on the table to help provide stronger evidence of need, great. But I don't really love the idea of formally asking the applicant to give us information to help make their case. That's their job. So I'm kind of torn on this. I would like to have a better sense of the need. So in that sense, like if they want to throw some money in to retain somebody to help establish that, that's fine. But I chafe a little bit at the notion of having to make a formal request of the applicant for information for them to make their case. And that's their job.
We've commented on the map several times.
Repeatedly.
You know, in regards to, this seems pretty close, what's the difference between this map and that map, and
we're trying.
gets around the
Yes.
gets around the subject.
Yes.
You know, I don't-
I'm prepared to just kind of deliberate based on the evidence that we've got.
And I don't necessarily, I mean, if this RFN expert is going to drive around and give us the hard data about signal strength or provide drop call data or all that, this engineer is not going to provide that. And they're just going to say, yeah, these colored maps look good to me. I don't think we need them.
You don't think we need what?
I don't think if all the expert is going to do is just say, yep, these maps are good. Without anything further, then we don't need them to spend $5,000. We already have the maps.
Okay, let's dig a little deeper on that.
Yeah.
Is there, let's just independently, do you think that we need an expert to help us with this?
No, I'm happy with the maps. I can read them, I can understand them.
I would like to look at, I personally would like to see data substantiating the maps, because I've gone on AT&T's website and their map is different. I've gone to the FCC map. That's different. I've looked at these maps. They're different. Now you go to the AT&T map, says, if I wanted to be a new customer, come into AT&T. You got great coverage. They're beautiful. Now there's a disclaimer in there. And you go there and it talks about the topography, but everyone's website looks like that. So which map is accurate? The one AT&T provides, the one FCC provides, or the maps here? Because they've stated the maps that are here are proposal coverage. They have said themselves that we believe this is the coverage you're going to get with this if we put this tower up. I don't personally see a radical difference in the maps in regards to the coverage, because the maps do stop at that 0.83 or whatever it is. I personally watch my own phone roll from 5G to 4G to 3G, and I don't lose calls. So I do not believe at this point that they have provided evidence that coverage is needed. I want that data.
I'm pretty aligned with where that's coming from. This is my take as well. And if people feel like an external consultant, I'm happy to continue to have as many meetings as we need to have.
All right, let's go. I'm going to hold Attorney Rosen.
I want to fit the board, but that's
No.
the rest of it.
Eric, how do you respond to that?
I agree with what I believe Deb was saying, which is we've got a bunch of different what's supposed to be information before us, but we don't know. We don't know which one to believe. And it's not clear. And we've got conflicting opinions coming about whether it's accurate or not accurate, whether it's incomplete. And even if we got the data, which I believe we should ask for just so we have more information to make a decision. Even if we get that data, I think we need somebody to help us interpret it and understand what it means and what it says. Because if somebody puts drop call data in front of me right now, I go, I don't know what it means. I mean, he had up on the board at one point, a bunch of what looked like drop call data. And I'm looking at it going, I don't know what that means. I just don't. And a lot of the stuff we've been presented, I don't know what it means. So I am in favor of having somebody help us to sort this out. Doesn't mean they're going to decide for us. We have to decide. And I think given the time constraints that we ought to ask now for this additional data, the drop call data and the road test data, so that we'll have that data available. If the expert that we hire comes in and says, oh, you can disregard all that, you don't need that, great. And we know that we don't need it. But without it, if we don't ask for it, we won't have it.
I think if we had been more experienced with this, we probably would have asked for the RF engineer earlier on as part of the peer review that's we're entitled to for the ordinance. So, the question is, do we want to take advantage of that? I mean, he's offering, Attorney Rosen's offering it, but I think we could have asked for it as well. So good for him for jumping ahead. But so the question is, and then the second question is if we don't make a request for the drop call data, then why are we hiring the engineer? Because the engineer is not going to be helping us if we don't have all that data.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Suggestion.
Yeah.
I think we should get a peer consultant, but I wouldn't know who that would be. But we need to define what we want to, and then get both entities to kind of participate.
When you say both entities, you mean that could.
AT&T, Attorney Rosen and the community.
Yeah.
Whether it's, this attorney, but have them say, okay, here's what we want that peer review to perform. Have each side agree that they've got the proper credentials, so we don't keep going back and forth. They disagree, they disagree. I think we need a mutual agreement, whoever we hire, and then what that drop date, what data they need to bring forward to have that done.
Okay.
If we're gonna try to select an independent consultant, I don't think we have the expertise to do that. We have to have it. We need to determine who it is that we want to have to perform those services.
I agree with that statement, Peter. The only thing is, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but I think it's we should make the determination about what we want. I mean, you had made some comment about that. I kind of want to I think we're at a point here, we need to kind of move away a little bit about tit for tat and on both sides of the issue and find the information we need to go forward.
No, I hear you, Debbie, but we heard a lot of information. If we're gonna do that, we reflect back on what occurred. So if we're gonna put a scope of services together, it does answer a lot of questions.
Yes, I absolutely agree with that.
I'm not saying we need to be biased in any way, but I think if we're gonna develop a scope of work, hire someone, we need to take all the things we've heard and say, okay, and we all need to make a list of things that we would like that person to do. And say, here's what we want, and then how does that get resulted into hiring the right entity?
And I agree with that 100%. My apologies. I thought you were saying we would ask each side what they would like to be too. And I was like, no, I don't think I want to go that
I
way.
think we ultimately make the decision, but we need them to participate as to what we're trying to accomplish. So that ultimately, we've heard everyone make all kinds of comments. We need to decide which ones are the important criteria for us to decide on. That person works for us, not that.
I'm going to give a counterpoint to what you said. I think I want to take what you're saying. I'm just going to bring it just to the other side. Just say, it's on the same line, but it's a different look. I don't want to get the applicant or the abutters involved in us hiring our own expert. That's for us. We decide how to do it. We now know what we're doing. we're gonna talk to that person. If they don't like the expert that we picked, if Attorney Campanelli doesn't like the expert we picked, they can voice their discomfort, but
I just look at what I'm saying, is listen to what they said.
that I would happily do.
I'm not asking them to participate.
Okay, great. Okay.
I'm just saying, all the things they've said, we compiled it from all the notes that Eric has taken, we've heard.
Okay.
And we use that as the basis. No, I'm not asking for their participation.
Okay, I misunderstood you then, that, because it sounded, to me, that's what it sounded like, so I was like,
I'm just saying, we've heard all kinds of stuff.
I'm in full agreement then, yeah.
From multiple people, we should take all their input and sift through it and pick the things that we think are critical.
You know, I'm really on, the idea that it's the applicant's responsibility to do stuff resonates with me a lot. But the other hand is, you know, who's controlling this process? Us. So, you know, I want to make the best decision that we can make so that I know at the end, that was the best decision. I want all the GD information that I can get at my disposal. So at the end of the day, I can look everybody in the eye and say, we made the right decision here. Because we had all the information that we really needed to do it. And so it's hard for me to go what I just said and also believe in that. And I think there's a message that we're giving to the applicant. And it's loud and clear. I think we should ask for the information that we want, and then it's on them. If they don't want to give it to us, then that speaks for what it speaks for. And I think we should take advantage of the engineer. And have somebody that we can ask, you know, we've asked probative questions of everybody else's experts. I'd like somebody that we know is our expert. And then at the end of the day, when we make our decision, we'll have an expert that we could cite in our opinion. Who was said to us, so we relied on it. Which is good. So again, I think Attorney Rosen, obviously, either he's, I mean, I don't want to, he's here, so you can tell me what you're doing, but it's a wise move to jump in and to do that because he could see where things are headed. So I think we should vote to take the offer. And Eric, if you feel firmly about the request, I think we should vote and make the request. If this is what we want, we're going to ask for, we're going to get it. We're not going to get it. We're going to ask for it. And then we will weigh all that stuff later and make it a totally full boat of information. Good? Okay. So I'd like to make a motion. I don't know about the timelines, Michael, because it sounds like it's going to fall on me to figure out how to organize everything. But in general, I'd like to make a motion to accept Attorney Rosen's offer for $5,000 to be available for us to hire an independent RF engineer that's suitable to us. I'll second that.
Yeah, and we'll decide and provide a scope of work for the engineer.
Yes. Well, we decide what, yeah. If you want to add that. Yeah, okay.
What if the engineer's fee is more than $5,000?
I thought about that, then I'll go back to Attorney Rosen and say, what do you think? Because we're back to we're telling them that we need this information. If they're not going to help us, then the message is clear, right? So
It could help us make our decision.
yeah. So any other discussion? Yeah.
Are we trying to get this done by May 8th?
I'm not going to commit to May 8th, but I will commit to doing, I think we have an obligation to move as reasonably quickly as we can, but yeah, well, if you give me authority, I can talk to Attorney Rosen. We'll figure it out. I think at the end of the day, we want to get through this, but they also want to make sure that he doesn't want to feel like he left something on the table. So, okay. Any more discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? You voting yes?
I don't think I can vote.
Why don't you try?
Aye.
Let the record show that everybody, including the alternates, voted yes. Okay, now the more difficult. Go ahead, make your motion. Eric.
I make a motion that.
Make it, speak a little louder, just so I.
I'm sorry. Make a motion that we request the information regarding drop.
Formal request.
Formally request the drop call data and drive test data, signal strength, so that point one.
For the areas in question.
Yes.
That's sufficient for everybody?
Who to be used by our.
Yeah, to be used by, yes, to be used by us in making our determination. Okay, we can add that. Eric, you got that, right?
Yeah, if that would actually be helpful if we ever come to a place where we turn it down because they haven't approved.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Any further? Okay, now go, Eric. Any further discussion? You want to add to that? Any further? We're good. Everybody good?
Good.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Chuck. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, let the record show unanimous, seven, all the members. I mean, Harrison alternate, he's not, he's allowed to. You need any clarification?
Yeah.
No guarantees on the 8th, but I will work with you to see.
Anything you can do to help that.
Okay, all right. Anything else about these two hearings? All right, let's take a vote to continue both matters, May 8th, 2025. I'll make the motion. Can I hear a second? Second. Okay, any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Let the record show all 7 of us. Okay, so that's, well, we have minutes. We have minutes that we need to approve. Did you give us minutes or
Yes, minutes of April 9th.
motion?
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
I have 5 minutes here. Second, any discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Let the record show everybody said yes. I'll take a motion to adjourn. Any other business? I know you, God, I didn't even breathe out. Any other business? Okay, go ahead.
Make a motion, meet, be adjourned.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Let the record show. We are adjourned.